Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Tailosive EV live on YouTube. Hope you're all having a fantastic Wednesday. It's been a while. I know we haven't streamed for a while. Sorry, I'm not streaming from inside the car. My wife's happily enjoying the Model 3. I'm glad because she's safe. I want her to be in the Model 3. But yeah, it's been busy. There's been a lot of EV news, even around me going on. New adventures, new companies, and new collaborations and stuff. So that's why there hasn't been a stream for a while. But I wanted to get one in here for the month of May. Try to stream at least once a month, maybe more if we have the time. But I wanted to kick off today's live stream with a question that was brought to us by Tor Aspen. So we have a couple of channel member questions here. He says, I wonder why I and many others don't have the 2024.14.6 update yet. I own a Tesla Model Y 2023 model. My last update was April 14th. Somehow he typed with an iOS and an Android emoji at the same time. Very impressive, Tor. Well, I'm happy to announce that I do know exactly why you haven't received it yet. There is a particular engineer whose job is to send out the updates to all of our cars, and he is no longer with the company. He decided he wanted to spend more time with family. It's just a lot of hustle. There's a lot of work that goes into working at a software division of an electric vehicle company. So he decided to take a step down and focus more time with his friends and family. Anyway, Gabriel says, would a Tesla two-door coupe make sense? Uh, Define sense. I mean, it depends on how two-door it is. I mean, for one, we should just acknowledge the elephant in the room that the doors on EVs are not usually the most expensive part. I mean, sure, it probably does add some level of complexity, and there's some additional cost to have four doors instead of two. But if you just took a Model 3 and shrunk it a little bit and sliced off the back doors, no, I don't think that would save all that much money. It would probably eat into the practicality of the vehicle by quite a bit. But if we're talking about hypothetical robotaxi that's just adding a steering wheel and pedals that is far more efficient, and because of that far more aerodynamic, far lighter weight, far more efficient design, they're able to put the no rare earth materials powertrain, the 48-volt architecture, the steer-by-wire. If they are able to incorporate the unboxed process, all of those things into one vehicle, then yeah, maybe a two-door coupe actually starts to make sense. So the answer, like most of my answers on these live streams, is it depends. It's like, how is it done? Doesn't mean any two-door coupe would make sense. Um, the Roadster in a way is still a two-door, but that's targeting a much higher price target. It's price bracket is what I meant to say. It's a performance vehicle. It's going to have three motors and cannons and probably a huge battery pack and a bunch of crazy stuff like that. Yeah, I know it has been a while since the last EV stream, but I'm hoping that as we return to somewhat of a normal routine schedule, maybe we can do these more often. I ideally would like to do them a couple times a week, but usually there's just videos and news to talk about. So when I kind of catch up on my list, that's typically when I'm like, okay, what do you guys want to talk about? Let's see. Because I'm selfish, unfortunately. A lot of the time, I'm just like, hey, I want to talk about this, so I'm going to make a video about this. The live streams are more community run, where pretty much for the most part, you guys are deciding what we talk about, and you kind of steer the conversation towards whatever topics are most interesting to you. So I'm selfish because there's a lot of EV topics I want to talk about, so that's when I make videos. But if I'm asking or more curious about what the community wants, then I go live and just be like, let's talk. Let's see what you guys want. Colin Penn says, I was stuck on beta 11 until yesterday. Finally got 2020. So, okay, so you guys are getting it. Is it just me? Let me check my app again. Gosh dang it. I even connected my Model 3 to my wife's work because she takes the Model 3 to work because I typically work from home. She has Wi-Fi at her work, of course, and I connected the car to the Wi-Fi there on the hope that it would download the update. It's still not, there's still nothing. I'm still on version 11.1, 2024.3.25. But wow, holy crap, I'm at 43,200 miles. Whew, that's a lot of miles, but the car is holding up fairly well. There's still some creaks and rattles that are temperamental, as in literally related to the temperature. And depending on how the car's feeling, sometimes it creaks a bit more, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know. I would love to take it in for service, but I literally haven't had time. It's been crazy. Um, but I'm glad Colin actually got it. Paul says he got 2024.14.8 for his Y yesterday. My God, what am I doing wrong here? Do I need to restart the car? I probably need to restart the car. And I'm not charging from home enough. Maybe that's part of it. Do updates only show up when the battery's at a certain amount? Because I was over here with Tor agreeing with him. He was saying, why haven't I gotten the update? And I was like, yeah, there's not a lot of people. I saw a poll. I think it was Drive Tesla Canada or somebody. Maybe it was Tesla Scope. Some big Tesla focused Twitter account tweeted out a poll asking for if you got the new UI refresh. And it was like 80% no. So I thought I was in the majority. But you guys, yeah, Freak Waka has it as well. I had the free FSD for the month of April. Yeah, I think I did too. I think it was start of April was when I had the free FSD month. So I don't think it's that. On the Model Y Performance, March of 2023. Okay, Freak Waka has it as well. Well, I'm happy for you guys. Congratulations, but this is not fair. I want that freaking UI refresh. I know Mike from the podcast does not like it, but goody for him because he has an Intel-based Model Y. He's not getting the UI refresh. I love the new refresh look. It looks fantastic. I want to see how it looks with my car. So I'm looking forward to trying it out myself, but it's just not here yet. Okay, I'm not alone. Rivian Mike, what? I'm sorry, it's muscle memory. Should I pronounce it Cubtrack? Cubtrack? Rivian Mike, whatever, whatever you go by. Says, I have not been updated either. Okay, so I'm not alone. Everybody in my area, at least, is not getting the new update. I guess it comes out in waves, and we just have to be patient. But Tor Aspen says, I'm still on FSD 11, too. Oh, boy. Why is that? I don't understand how Apple is able to roll out software updates so consistently when there's like a billion iPhones, but somehow Tesla only has, what, 5 million cars, but they can't roll that out as quickly? Maybe there's something on the back end on the server side that makes it more difficult. I have it in the UK nearly 2 weeks ago. Jeez. Okay, Michael Miller is on the same version I am. How to know if your car is Intel and AMD. I believe there's a section called About This Vehicle. I believe you press the car icon in the bottom left. You scroll down to software, and then there's like a more info button. I'm blanking on exactly the number of states. It's fun for the first 2 days. Afterwards, it just becomes normal. The UI update? Oh, man. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it's not that insane. It's a small thing, but that's probably why it bothers me the most. It's a small thing that I should have in my vehicle, and it's not there. Apple is bigger. Tesla probably can't push that amount of data. They don't have to push the same amount of data. My point is, Apple has, I think they said 2 billion active devices, but 1 billion iPhones, which we know are all running iOS. Tesla has maybe, and of course it's different in different countries. In the US, maybe 2 million cars. So we're talking about Tesla pushing out 2 million software updates versus Apple pushing out 1 billion. And I thought Tesla had the world's fastest supercomputer with the most state-of-the-art. No one has as many teraflops of NPU processing power that we have. You know, I don't think it should be this staggered personally, but Tesla used to send out FSD updates all at once until the terrible release of 10.3. Everything changed since then. Well, FSD updates I can understand being a little bit tedious of because they're, driving cars around. But the UI update? Come on. Like, that's not a safety thing. That's just a feature thing. Let's see. Ivan says he's on 2024.8.9. They gave him the update yesterday, but they pulled it before I could install it. What? Oh, okay. So the plot thickens. They sent it to you, but before you installed it, they pulled it. Interesting. The cars are moving, and that means the software has to chase it. Oh, I didn't think about that. Wait, phones move too. So, yeah, the slow release is meant to catch bugs. Apple has a beta program. Tesla doesn't. Maybe they should have a beta program. I think they should. I mean, they had an FSD beta program. Now it's a supervised program, but I don't think that was because it was out of beta. They were just looking for a way to... they basically needed to find a way to encourage people pay attention because too many people thought FSD meant the car could drive itself. I don't know why they got that conclusion. Why would you think full self driving can drive itself? That's ridiculous. So they had to add the parentheses. Tesla can't push the update all at once because it's too much data. No, I'm saying that I understand what you said the first time. I'm just saying Apple is pushing a lot more data. They've got a billion devices. I don't see why Tesla can't push 2 million devices, software updates around the same day. I don't get it. Especially when Tesla touts themselves as an AI and robotics company and they develop their own silicon and personal computer. Anyway, we could talk about this all day if you want to, but I also should answer Jackson Smith's question. Thank you, by the way, for all of our channel supporters. He says, now that you're working at Tello, do you see yourself ever getting one of their trucks? Personally, I hate the massive tanks for trucks that are on the road today, but I could totally see myself getting a Tello if they come to Canada. I'm sure they want to. I'm positive they want to be in as many places as possible. Oh, wow. In a very random, unnecessary super chat from Avocado Atrocity just said, I appreciate you. Wow. You didn't have to send a super chat, but thank you. Anyway, Jackson Smith, I'm glad you're in the chat because we can... very unnecessary super chat. Sorry, I'm confused. But I'm glad Jackson Smith is in the chat because I can address this question. Yeah, I at the moment have not put down a reservation quite yet, but I talk about it a lot and I'm working with them a lot, and there's a lot of things we're talking about at the Tello team that I cannot wait to share, but can't at this time, of course, because of contracts and everything, and they want to announce everything in the right way. But I think it's just natural that the longer I talk about the product, the longer I look at the product, and the better I know the product and the people working on it, it's just kind of inevitable that, yes, I do kind of want one now. I've never had an issue with pickup trucks in general. I just didn't like the efficiency hit. And honestly, there was a lot of things I loved about the Cybertruck when I checked it out and drove it. Personally, I still love the look. I think the Cybertruck's super eye-catching and iconic. And I love the steer-by-wire. I love the software. I love the mobile app. There's so many little details about it I love. But the reason I have still to this day never put down an order on one is because the biggest hurdles I have with the Cybertruck are the inefficiency. It uses about twice the energy as my current vehicle. Maybe not quite twice, but close. And the size. So the rear wheel steering and everything helps, but at the end of the day, it's still a big vehicle. So there's still going to be situations where it's difficult to park, and it's hard to navigate in tight spaces. And especially the more and more I've had Tello on the mind, of course, a lot of people probably aren't thinking about them as much as I am because I'm working with them now and we're talking about content strategies and how we want to get the word out about them. But the more it's on the mind, the more situations come up where I'm going, man, okay, I wish the car was a little bit narrower, or I wish this car was a little bit shorter so I could fit here or fit there. I wish I had a little bit more practicality here and there. So I am biased is what I'm trying to say. So the obvious answer is yes, I do think I'll own one day. It's down the road, of course. I think my Aptera should hopefully be ready before then. I'm not in need of a pickup truck right this second, which is good. At least at this stage in my life, the Model 3 is fine. In fact, now that my wife is working again, I don't know if we talked about this, but she's driving the Model 3 around quite a bit more than she used to. It's funny. She wasn't even looking for a job either. She was going to volunteer at this nonprofit organization that helps young women. It's a great thing, but I won't go too deep off the rails. But she just wanted to volunteer there. She was just like, oh, I want to help out. She had spare time while I was working, and she was like, I want to help out this organization because she knew the people that worked there, and she went there to volunteer and do the training and stuff. And they said, actually, can we just offer you a job instead? We kind of want someone that can be a little bit more showing up on a routine basis. So she was like, oh, well, if you want me to work, I guess I can. So that's the little life update. I'm not sure if I've talked about that publicly, but anyway, so she drives the Model 3 to work and she loves it and she's happy with it. It becomes most noticeable how much she loves the Model 3 every time she has to drive our old car, the Hyundai Sonata, which we still have. It's got over 190,000 miles on it, but it's kind of working. Part of it still works. And sometimes I'm on a trip or I'm driving somewhere, so I take the Model 3. And whenever my wife has a day where she drives the Sonata, she goes, "Man, I I, I hate that thing." She's like, "I missed the Model 3 already. It didn't take too long. It's like the Sonata's loud and the seat's uncomfortable and it makes all this noise and it's so hard to." She complains a lot about the steering. Even though I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with the power steering on the Sonata, it's just inherently it's a larger wheel and it's a lot harder to move around than the Model 3 for whatever reason. Maybe something's wrong with the Sonata, I don't know. But she misses the Model 3, and as of lately, especially now with my new job at Tello and me going to be driving down there a bit more frequently, I've actually now wanted an Aptera even more so than I already did, because I was like, for this use case where I'm driving, a few hours away, a couple times a week likely, having a 1 to 2 seater vehicle that's just super aerodynamic and super efficient would be perfect. Um, so that this position at Tello actually might affect which Aptera I end up going with. As in, if of course, there's a referral program and stuff that I plan on taking advantage of through the Aptera points. But if it's possible for me to get an Aptera sooner rather than later, and if that means not going with the 1,000 mile range, I might just go ahead and do it, because I want my wife to be able to drive the Model 3 to work, and I want to be able to drive the Aptera to work. So this might actually affect the Aptera timeline a little bit more. But yeah, it's obviously the Aptera for some people might be the perfect vehicle, and it might be their only vehicle if they live by themselves or don't have family. But I think most people, even the people at Aptera, would acknowledge that it's probably not going to be the only vehicle at a lot of households. I love it. I'm not trying to downplay it or anything, but it's a 2-seater. At the end of the day, it is a 2-seater, which means if you want to pack the whole family around or take the kids to school, or you want a vehicle to go camping with the family and everything, the Aptera might be a little bit crammed. Maybe you'd get 2 Aptera. Maybe that's your solution. If you have dad in one and mom in the other, I don't know. But some people can't necessarily afford the 2-car solution, and some people want one car that can kind of do everything, which is why I think it's good that Tello's kind of targeting an underserved market. And that aspect of it, I think, might make it kind of the perfect family vehicle for us in the future down the road when we have kids potentially, or just want to move family members around. I mean, I think always at some point we're going to need a vehicle with more than 2 seats in our lives. Now, for long distance commuting, again, I still think that the Aptera is perfect, because that high range, low price, super aerodynamic, and the solar charging is a huge plus as well. Even if you didn't get any solar charging, the Aptera can still top off for a fraction of the price of any other vehicle on the road. Even my Model 3 would look inefficient next to an Aptera, and my Model 3 is not that inefficient. You two are in high demand in the workforce. I guess so. But I hope that answers your question. It's kind of a down the road thing, because of course we have lots of things I can't share yet about Tello and production and all that. But I hope to get one as soon as possible, because for one, I want to make videos with it, and I want to showcase how much practicality there is and how much utility there is. But yeah, I do think I could see myself getting one down the road. Anyway, let's see. Hummus Yummus says, I want to Tello so bad, especially because my wife would allow it and not a Cybertruck. Oh, okay. Fair enough. Cybertruck's pretty big. I know I've spoken to a few of my friends' wives over the past week who are a little bit more interested in the Tello than the Cybertruck. Jackson says, I mean, you'll be right there hearing about the good and the bad, so I don't think you could be any more informed about a product. That's true. That's honestly, talking with the Aptera head of marketing, before I took the job at Tello, I just asked them, like, hey, do you think I should do this, work for a startup? And he was just like, yeah, you should. And he basically told me all the stuff you can't say is usually the most interesting. So as a fan and as a big enthusiast in the EV community, I was very excited at the opportunity to work for a company just so, for my own selfish reasons, I get to know about things before they happen. That's always fun and cool. But yeah, then comes the challenging part of like, okay, now you can't say all this. Dang it. It's hard. It's really hard. But Kooptrack looks like one of our new recent Tello reservations. He said, pull some strings and get it to me and we can do a road trip. I canceled my Cybertruck for the exact reasons. Yeah, the inefficiency and the size of the truck. I'm not even trying to say necessarily that trucks that big, F-150 sized or Cybertruck size, I'm not saying they shouldn't exist. I'm just saying I think the capabilities of a lot of those trucks today are not justification for their size. Like, for example, the short I posted on Tello socials today, um, I used my grandma's truck as an example because it's kind of a standard sized F 150. It's like the most popular F 150 trim. And of course, it is quite large. And my grandma's actually complained about it to us. She complained just this morning. She was just like, oh, it's so hard to move that thing around. It's so hard to navigate. She doesn't really like driving it. It's very hard to park for her. Visibility's not great. So many of you may wonder, okay, well, why does your grandma have that truck? Well, they really love camping and they really love towing. Their big old trailer, I think they have a 10,000 or 11,000 pound trailer, and that was pretty much the sole reason they bought that truck. So she hates it for pretty much every other thing. The bed isn't that big and it takes up all this space and it just consumes a bunch of gas, and the engine has a bunch of other problems that I didn't even go into because I could be talking all day about engine issues and problems they've had with the transmission. But the point is, I think my grandma's purchase was at least a little bit more justified because she had a use case. It may not be the most common one in the world. She bought the truck to use it a couple times a year where they move that big trailer. But I know there's a lot of people out there that buy those big old trucks and barely even do that. And having a truck that still could have a big bed and still could seat five and still have meaningful towing capacity, I think doesn't justify a pickup truck that big. I think if you really need to do cross country towing, a truck close to that of like a Ram 1500 or an F 150 is big enough. And for the vast majority of people that are just using trucks to move stuff around occasionally, but also want to fit their families in them, go camping in the weekend, and also have to drive through a city and find tiny parking spaces to fit in. Yeah, we should be pushing more on how space efficient can we be with these vehicles. And I'm glad that there's a company like Tello that's just dead set on, we're not just going to be a little bit smaller than everybody else, like a Rivian versus a Cybertruck. Rivian's a little bit smaller, but they're like, no, we want to go crazy small, like two-door Mini Cooper small, and then maximize bed space with the 5 feet, but then the mid-gate makes it 8 feet, and you can have the 5 seats if you need it and still have well over 300 miles of range with a battery pack much smaller. So yeah, you guys know the shtick. So it's very exciting as a product. In my opinion, it's fairly easy to sell. I just have to kind of get the word out about people with it. But I'm glad to see we have some Tello fans in the chat. Thank you, by the way, for Cameron for charging the channel. That's very nice of you. And Jackson Smith for 11 months of support. Very kind of you. Someone got the update 3 days ago. I'm realizing that you can't get the launch edition with referrals since credits will apply until others purchase their own orders. It's possible because I am fairly certain a lot of my referrals for the Aptera are on the Accelerator program. So everybody on the Accelerator program is going to get their Aptera before me, regardless of if I pay for it or use credits. So we'll see. Once deliveries go through, we'll have an idea for exactly how many referral points I'm going to get. But it is... Oh, Cub Track. Gotcha. Do you mind answering how far you are from having the referral credits needed to get the launch edition? Oh, I see what you're asking. Yeah, we don't know because they're not official until they take delivery. Yeah. But I might end up getting a launch edition depending on how many people in the Accelerator program used my code. The Tello does have NACS, yes. I mean, it will have NACS. That's the intention. I hope I can pull some strings for CubTrack. Let's see. I have the Model 3 refresh and still haven't gotten the update. Oh, well, that's just not fair. To be fair, if you took delivery of the Model 3 refresh recently, then it's, I think, fair to say, same thing happened to me. You don't get software updates on a newly delivered vehicle for the first several weeks. I think it's usually 3 to 4 weeks before you get your first update. I don't know why it takes a while to get your first update, but that's been the case for a lot of people, and that was the case for me. Could you show what a podcast looks like on Now Playing on your Tesla through Apple Podcasts? I would love to, but it's not with me right now. My wife drove it to work. Um, the other thing was when we talked about getting the Aptera, I asked my wife, I was like, would you want to drive the Aptera to work or the Model 3? And she said the Model 3, and I said, why? And she just said, the Aptera is going to attract too much attention. Which is, depending on who you ask, it's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't mind the attention, but it might get a little old a little fast. I was a little concerned by it just driving the Cybertruck around a little bit in Phoenix with Gregor Truck, which is a lot of fun. If you want more attention and you like talking about your vehicle, then having a vehicle that's a very drastic, different shape is probably a good way to do that. But if you don't like attracting too many eyes and getting too many people looking at you or trying to take pictures of the vehicle, then that might be a problem. And that was a consideration for my wife. She was like, I don't, at least early on, she was like, I don't want to drive it around too much because people are going to come up to me and ask about it, and I don't want to talk to strangers about it. Whereas she drives a Model 3 to work, no one notices. No one brought up any attention to it. But she did say down the road when it's been out for a while and lots of people know about Aptera because they're delivering at scale and there's, thousands and thousands of them driving them around, then she'd feel more comfortable driving it to work and people can kind of have a feel for it. But you got your car on Star Wars Day. Oh, congrats. If you have FSD, you won't get the spring update for several weeks. I don't have FSD. I did have the free trial, but I talked to people earlier in the chat that had the free trial at the same time that I did, and they now have the new update. So I don't freaking know what the problem is. MC Sykes says, do you think the U.S. should just drop the 100% tariff on Chinese EVs and just let people who can't go compete go bankrupt? People are tired of paying $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 for cars and trucks. That's a really good question, and there's several different angles to look at it. So on the consumer end, I totally see the argument for it because you're like, hey, these American-made EVs are expensive. In China, they seem to be really cost competitive, and they can make them for much, much, much cheaper. And they're really competitive. So let's just let the free market do what the free market does. Let's just remove all the Chinese tariffs, Chinese EV tariffs. That way we just flood the U.S. market with affordable EVs, and that would probably be good for electrification, right? Sure. We might be able to increase the adoption rate if we just have a plethora of affordable, decently made electric vehicles in the U.S. I see that argument. On the other side, there's a reason those EVs are so cheap. It's not just because China has a good supply chain over there. It's also because they have far, far looser requirements for wages, labor. The labor laws are far more chill over there. So that's part of the reason we don't make smartphones and a lot of electronics in the U.S. is because it's so absurdly cheaper to build them in China than it is here. So you probably could remove all those tariffs and you'd get a large influx of EV sales from the Chinese manufacturers, but there's a very, very real chance that you would bankrupt or kill off a lot of U.S. automakers, and they would struggle to sell their EVs, and you would probably end up having to close most, if not all, of the automotive plants in the U.S., which would result in massive layoffs and giving a foreign entity a lot of control and a lot of power over our economy. So from the long-term, bigger picture view, I kind of understand why the Chinese EV tariffs are there. I do think they kind of serve a purpose to not just protect American automakers, but also protect American workers. While, yes, it is more expensive to manufacture vehicles here, there are a lot more strict rules on pay, working conditions, working hours that aren't as strict overseas. So it's a complex topic. I could understand both perspectives. I don't really blame anybody for wishing that they would get rid of the tariffs because it would probably result in cheaper EVs on the consumer side. But government is trying to protect its people and try to ensure a healthy economy. And I'm not convinced that kind of letting the Chinese brands, which are heavily government funded, and have far looser requirements in regards to labor laws and wages, letting them basically control all of the product and all of the vehicles in our nation. I'm not sure that's a great idea. I don't think that would be good for our labor force, and it probably wouldn't be good for our economy, to just kind of hand over all the power and control. Um, Remove all the two. I do think there's probably a decent chance about what Hummus Yummus is saying. You won't be caught alive in a Chinese EV. That's the problem. I mean, there's probably a stigma with, like, if they did drop all the tariffs, there'd be some people that are like, ah, that's made in China. I don't like that. But there's still a lot of people here that drive EVs or cars in general that are made in Japan or made in Korea or made in Mexico. There's some people that are bothered by that, but also other people that are like, I don't care, I just want an affordable car. So I would be curious exactly how much it would affect the demand, but I do think it would be probably the biggest threat to existing automakers is having a government that is heavily subsidizing their companies' infrastructure and incentivizing them to not pay their workers all that great or have really harsh labor laws to meet certain production standards. The Chinese government is scary in many ways, but there's pros and cons to having a fast-moving, efficient government that's very much kind of like the opposite of the U.S. government. So there can be a lot less freedoms in regards to speech and what you're allowed to say over there. But when the Chinese government wants something done, they get it done very quickly. And that would be very hard to compete against here if they were allowed. We're already kind of seeing what happens in Europe, and the European automakers are having to compete with the Chinese automakers. And I don't think necessarily it would bankrupt all of the U.S. automakers, but it would definitely accelerate a lot of their demise. Um, I wanted a Chinese car. I watched a Chinese car show on YouTube, and they had awesome stuff. I wish we could get here. Oh yeah, but I'm sure there's the same thing in China. There's probably a bunch of things they wish that they could have it here in the U.S. Like freedom of speech. Do you think that? Sorry, I read that. Do I think the Intel Model 3s will get the UI refresh? Any chance of an AMD retrofit? I don't think likely. I think there's probably a little bit more emphasis on the reflections and visuals that they just can't bring over. Apparently I sound a little bit more quiet. See, this is what OBS does. I can raise the volume a little bit there, but yeah, OBS has been all over the place. Maybe I need to restart my computer. 100%. Derek says remove all the tariffs. Do we want to continue using fossil fuels? No, but I don't think those are mutually exclusive. You can not want to remove the tariffs and not want to keep using fossil fuels. It's another way to incentivize American companies, American employees, American workers. It's not a new thing. The Chinese government does it to their citizens too. I mean, it's the same, probably the same thing with their whole social media and stuff. How's your first week of Tele going? So far, so good. I'm enjoying it, and they've given me so much creative control. I'm very grateful. So, yeah, I'm very happy with how it's going so far. It's very early, but yeah. My point was the safety. That's why I said general use won't be caught alive instead of won't be caught dead. I mean, I know there's very different like safety requirements here in the U.S. than there is for vehicles in China, but I wouldn't be shocked that Chinese vehicles also have safety systems in place, and maybe they're not as good as the U.S. ones, but I don't think it means that like every car crash you're in with a Chinese EV would be an instant death. I mean, the device you're watching this live stream on was probably made in China, right? So they have to have a certain level of consistency and decent enough build quality to be able to mass produce, hundreds of millions of smartphones for the world. And those have batteries and electronics in them. I know EVs are a little bit of a different beast, but Tesla sells pretty well in China. I think that's their best performing market, actually. Giga Shanghai is the most productive Tesla factory. So they different standards over there, but they still can make their vehicles safe. To be honest, I don't care about the U.S. OEMs. They saw this coming and chose to do nothing about it. Instead, they looked to the government to stop them so they can sell their $100,000 cars and trucks with crap quality. I understand not caring about the OEMs, but caring about the employees that they employ, I think is more where the government's coming from. And I'm not, I don't like to get very political. I tend to think the government should get out of the way most of the time, but I do think that the argument of trying to protect American jobs is a legit one. Um, and there is some risk to letting another country basically cover all of your goods and services. That's that's a valid concern. Um, Most U.S. things are made in China. It's true, and there's a price for that. There's the labor laws and the working hours are very hard over there, um, and I don't think we should necessarily incentivize that. So let's see, tariffs mean delaying EV transition and means more fossil fuels. Um, yeah, but you can't trade fossil fuels and uh, legacy auto for every potentially hundreds of thousands of people losing their jobs and having another government in control of everything that goes. There's more concerns to be had than just safety. The Chinese government loves data. They love building profiles on people, and you betcha they would put some kind of software in EVs that they would bring to the US that would probably be looking to manage data and kind of monitor what's going on over here. Um, so I don't want the cure to be worse than the disease, that kind of thing. Um, let's keep jobs that don't keep the fossil fuel industry alive. Yeah, I agree. Keeping It's just natural to want your country to have an economy and a job market domestically. That's a fair argument in my opinion. You have to trust a car a lot more than a phone because of how dangerous it is to transit in general. Yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying that um, there's lots of vehicles that are made in China and shipped globally. Shipped to Europe or shipped to other continents, and they're safe enough. Maybe they're not the safest thing in the world, but there's still airbags and crumple zones and stuff that they can build into that thing, even if the standards are technically different there. Um, let's see. China isn't just cheap stuff. People need to get away from that thought. Yeah, exactly. It's a huge supply chain optimization thing, but I wonder if people would be willing to. I mean, people already complain about the price of electronics and phones and stuff, but imagine how much more they would complain if they were built in the U.S. But at least with vehicles, I think they're already more expensive because the car's got a lot of mass and a lot of complexity, a lot more mass and materials than a phone. So it's probably not as night and day difference as building a phone in China versus building a car in China. Um, what do I think of the proposed tax per mile? As someone who drives a lot, I'm not terribly excited by it, even though on paper it makes a lot more sense. I already don't like how much I have to pay for registration on my vehicles here in California. It's exceptionally high. It's kind of crazy expensive. Um, so I would like it to be a bit more fair across the board, where gas vehicles and EVs, I don't think the registration should be that different between the two. I know that EVs tend to be heavier, but not as heavy as the taxes are reflecting. And I certainly think there should probably be an incentive to drive less and you pay less for registration because that goes towards road taxes and stuff. Um, but as someone who drives a lot, I have a fear that if they switch to it as a by the mile basis, then it's going to result in me having to pay more than I already do, which I don't want for selfish reasons, of course. But I guess I'm tearing up the roads a lot more. I wish the Aptera would be, it's an auto cycle, so the registration should be quite a bit less than a typical vehicle. Um, but yeah, I feel like there needs to be more incentives for hyper efficient vehicles like the Aptera. Um, Avocado Atrocity again super chatted for no reason. That was very kind of you. Guys, the Chinese government won't even let Tesla work over there unbothered. They block everything the US makes, and the US can't do the same thing. Yeah, I just think the people. It's a good point, Avocado. I just think the people that are advocating that the US should remove their tariffs would probably also say that China should remove. They're not saying that China is okay to ban US products and U.S. services over there. They're just saying get rid of the tariffs and bans in general. That's an assumption I'm making. I assume that would align with their previous thoughts on governments and stuff like that. But anyway, appreciate the super chat. Very generous of you today. Fizzwizzle says, what are your thoughts on cars needing pedestrian safety? The U.S. doesn't have any regulation which allows the huge trucks. EVs might score less with the power and weight. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that it's actually a really exciting topic because Tello cares, I would say, more about pedestrian safety than most. They talked about it on a podcast recently, Jason Marks and Forrest North, the co-founders, and they mentioned how with a sedan that's kind of low to the ground, you have the issue of, if it hits a pedestrian, they have a lot further to fall. So in Europe, they actually have active safety systems in place to pop the back end of the hood upwards so that the fall isn't as harsh for a biker or a pedestrian that gets hit by the car. And yeah, the U.S. doesn't have these requirements, but in Europe they do, and I've seen it detailed. But still, even with that hood popping up, with a sedan being much lower to the ground, it's a long distance. It's a lot of time for the pedestrian to speed up when they get hit. So the further they fall, the harder they fall, essentially. And also with big trucks, like you said, that huge hood decreases visibility, and there has been a noticeable, quite measurable uptick in pedestrian deaths due to the rising size of hoods on larger pickup trucks, which eats into your frontal visibility. So Tello addresses both of those issues with the big hood and the low sedan sitting position by having a vehicle that doesn't have a super low hood. It's still somewhat high off the ground, and it's angled in a way that the pedestrian doesn't fall all that far, and it also has like basically the lowest hood of any pickup truck because there's basically no hood. The cab and everything kind of goes right to the front. And they have all kinds of secret sauce that I can't talk about in regards to both occupant safety and pedestrian safety. So yeah, I'm learning more about that and figuring out that yes, we probably do need to rethink how we design a lot of these vehicles. And I think it's very exciting to actually be working with a company that has solutions to these very depressing problems. And it's just a matter of, okay, how do we get this out and into the market? So by having a windshield and a hood that's kind of higher off the ground, you don't fall as hard as you would if you got hit by a Model 3 or any sedan really that's kind of lower to the ground. And by having basically no hood or a hood line that's very, very low, the visibility is fantastic. Basically, right where the edge of the windshield is when you're driving around the Tello, there's only just a couple of inches further beyond that windshield position of actual space that could hit people. So it should be very easy to see everything that's going on in front of you, and that absolutely helps with keeping pedestrians safe, is making sure the driver can see. You still don't have V12 on your 4-month-old Model Y. See, this whole thing is making me wish Tesla could get on top of the software update rollouts. I get that they're the probably best software in the biz, and my favorite thing about Teslas is the software, but also it's still not enough. It still needs to be more. I just feel like we need to double down on the software, honestly. Let's see. Mike in the Woods says, in Ontario, we have no registration fees, but we get raked over the coals for insurance. Ooh, that's fair. I don't know if that is fair, but insurance isn't necessarily the cheapest here either. What is the average efficiency of the Aptera? Well, we don't have highway range tests yet. They're holding off on doing that until they have PI builds. There's not a lot of reason to do highway range tests on prototypes because you have different weight, you have different powertrain thermal performance, and you have different tires potentially. There's a bunch of things that can change, so they're waiting to do the real world range test until they have production intent parts on the whole vehicle, and then they can calibrate that kind of stuff. But luckily simulation data has gotten incredibly accurate now, so you can just kind of plug into a calculator, here's your frontal area, here's your coefficient of drag, here's your weight, and the math checks out fairly well. it should be able to achieve pretty close to 10 miles per kilowatt hour. From the beginning, I still looked at that as a best case scenario. Um, I think, some people might freak out when it first come out and say, "Oh, it's not as efficient as they claimed it." It's like, yeah, well, what vehicle is, right? Like, how often do Teslas actually hit their EPA estimated range numbers? It happens, but most of the time with how people drive, or if you're driving in the extreme heat or extreme cold, that affects the thermal performance of everything. So in real world range, I expect to be lower, of course, than what Aptera has stated publicly. Those are always like the EPA tests. They're the best case scenario. So my whole excitement and hype around Aptera is the fact that even if they're 30% worse than their claims, that's still incredible. 7 miles per kilowatt hour, like no one's even close to that right now for like a enclosed vehicle that can go long distance. So if it turns out that it's 30% worse than they initially said, and they get 7 miles per kilowatt hour, then that means with the launch edition having a 45 kilowatt hour battery pack, your range is still real world over 300 miles for a vehicle that has a 45 kilowatt hour pack and can charge itself via sunlight. Like, that's still incredible. That's still way longer range than my Model 3 with a battery pack that's significantly smaller weight, more affordable. Tax credits probably have a little bit of effect on that, but still something that can passively charge itself, something that has a right to repair, something that didn't require paint. It also just looks really cool. Love those doors that open up on the side. So yeah, I totally think there's still a market for it, even if it comes out and it turns out to be 7 miles per kilowatt hour. If they hit 10, that's incredible. And I think they probably will hit 10 when the conditions are right, averaging a certain speed with certain weather. They probably will get around there, but even if it's not 10, I still think that's incredible. So basically, we could turn a 1,000-mile range Aptera into a 650-mile range. That's still amazing. What other EV on the market is going to get 650 miles of range and be like under $50,000? First of all, there's just not an EV that goes 650 miles, period. But let alone the ones that probably come anywhere close to that are likely in the 80, 90, $100,000 range. So I still think, I still think that the Aptera has a market regardless of how exactly efficient it is. The funny thing is U.S. companies still have to care about pedestrian safety because they still want to sell in Europe. Yeah, but there's you're right, but there's little things that they leave out in the U.S. market because there isn't as strict pedestrian safety. Like that thing I talked about with the hood popping up to reduce the amount of angle or distance that the pedestrian falls onto the hood. They do that for the European Model 3s. They don't do that for the US-made Model 3s. So there's still some things they can do to optimize for its safety, but there's definitely still some things that they cut out. I wonder why smaller vehicles are less safe than bigger ones in the U.S. Is it because of the other house-sized vehicles that are on the road in the U.S. is too addicted to big cars and trucks to the point where driving a smaller vehicle is dangerous? Well, I would question that assumption that smaller vehicles are inherently dangerous, because what I've explained to people a lot, and this is a frustrating topic for me personally, because I've found that there's not a great way to... You can make a very safe, very small vehicle, is the truth, but people don't want to hear it. Like, people kind of stick with what they want to believe. It doesn't matter if you have data or simulations or real-world crash tests that prove and verify everything you've said. Like, if you go too deep into the data, people go, "Oh, I don't know, this is too complicated." They don't want to hear about it when you support your viewpoint with evidence. But if you just say, like, well, it'll be safe, then they go, well, where's your evidence? If you try to keep it boilerplate, they say, oh, that's not good enough. But then when you give the data, they say, oh, that's too complex. I don't know what you're talking about. So it's a hard thing to really convince people on, I think, mostly in my experience, because I've heard safety concerns before I was hired by Tello about Tello, and then I've heard safety concerns about Aptera, and then had both companies explain how much work and how much time and energy goes into the safety systems of these vehicles. Like, the stuff that you hear publicly, I would say, is like the tip of the iceberg. Like, the amount of work, both talking with Aptera and Tello off the record, and talked about things that we can't share yet or can't show. Oh my God! Like the things that they're allowed to share publicly is very, very small compared to how much work and time went into every little detail to ensure the best possible crash rating, the best possible pedestrian safety, all of these things that engineers are obsessing over, like safety. And people who are just like browsing social media and see one picture of the vehicle go, well, that's not safe. And that's the limit of is just their gut reaction. My gut says that's not safe, and that couldn't really be further from the truth. Um, like, and the other angle that I wish more people would acknowledge is that safety is not a linear scale. There are absolutely a lot of vehicle design decisions that make them safer in certain circumstances and more dangerous in others. Um, hey, Dad. He said, you should buy your dad a Tello. Everybody wants a Tello, don't we? Yeah, I got to arrange that. I don't know if I'll get one. Uh, but, like, Aptera Owners Club did a great video dissecting how there's a lot of vehicle decisions where, like, yes, on one hand, if you're driving into another vehicle head on, then having more weight and being higher off the ground does make you more safe. But is that the most common type of vehicle collision? Spoiler alert, it's not. The most common type of vehicle collisions are getting rear-ended or hitting into a stationary object like a telephone pole or a barrier on a freeway. Those are far more common than having two cars just straight drive into each other at maximum speed. That's what everybody imagines. How does that perform in a crash test? And they just picture Hummer EV versus, Honda Accord, Hummer EV1, therefore heavier vehicle safer. When in reality, having all of that extra weight actually hurts you in more common collision situations, not to mention, of course, the big topic, which is, okay, that might make you safer by 10%, but it makes other vehicles on the road 50% more likely to die because of you. So you're more likely to live, but you're more likely to kill others in a collision or a rear-ended, or all of that additional inertia when hitting into a parking barrier or a stationary, like a telephone pole or a tree. All of that additional weight makes it harder and harder to develop a adequate crumple zone to take the blunt a lot of that impact. So safety is not this like linear scale of this is unsafe, this is safe. It's this wide spectrum of compromises. And of course, Americans, being all freedom, independence focused, a lot of us would probably even publicly acknowledge, I think I've talked to people like this, there's probably a lot of Americans out there that would acknowledge, yes, I would rather have a vehicle that makes me 10% safer, even if it makes everybody else 50% more likely to die because of me. That's okay. I'd rather have a vehicle that's more dangerous for everybody else if it means I'll be a little bit safer. There are people in this country that think that way, and we can't stop them. That's not illegal. We can't say, like, don't think that way. But as far as safety is concerned, I do think people tend to prioritize or think about how vehicles would perform in certain circumstances, which are far less common than others. And it's like, okay, yeah, in a head-on collision at highway speeds, maybe having a smaller, lighter vehicle is more dangerous, but is that the most likely collision? No, it's definitely not. If you just look up Aptera Owners Club's videos on safety, I think he did a great job breaking it down. I've tried my best in other videos to explain it, but I thought his were better. That's just me. It's mostly just a U.S. thing. You love your giant trucks over there. Well, don't bunch me in. But we don't want to stereotype any country. I know it's easy and fun to stereotype Americans, but there are a lot of us here in the U.S. that do still care about pedestrian safety, vehicle safety, and efficiency. And there's a lot of passionate people I've already seen excited about the Tello because we're sick of the big, fat pickup trucks. We don't want these big pickup trucks anymore. We're sick of them too here. There's a lot of ideas and a lot of, perspective in the American melting pot. But yes, there are definitely many people here in the U.S. that are of the belief that whoever has the bigger truck is the bigger man, and whichever vehicle is heavier and bigger is safer, and that's just not necessarily the case. Safety standards need to better account for how dangerous a vehicle is to others. I Absolutely agree. And I also think it's kind of pointless. I don't know what that noise is. Is it my water bottle? No. Sounds like my neighbor's working on something. Anyway, um, what I was going to say is I think buying vehicles based on which one is higher off the ground, which one is heavier, so that you feel safer, which, by the way, is typically not the case. And I hope Jason explained in our first update video for Tello that having a giant engine in the front of your vehicle and looking at that is okay. Well, I have crumple zone. It's kind of like his perfect analogy that kind of simplified it for dum dums like me is that it's basically like big pillow is going to be softer and have more crumple than a little pillow. But if that big pillow has a giant wooden board inside of it and you get hit by a big pillow with a giant wooden board, it's not going to feel very good. Um, but battling that market of just, oh, well, let's buy bigger this, bigger that, so that we're higher off the ground and we're safer. For one, it's not really that much safer because you have this giant engine in front of you that gets pushed into the cabin. And for two, guys, at the end of the day, we're sharing the road with semi trucks. So if you really are trying to win like the classic game from medieval times, what is that game called where they hold the jousting? Is that what it is? Where they hold out the big poles and you're just hoping that your pole is bigger and you hit the other guy off his horse before you. The semi trucks are going to win, and they're going to win every single time. So we should be designing vehicles based on the most common crash situations, which would be frontal into stationary objects, in which case having a lighter weight vehicle actually helps you, and getting rear-ended, which means rear crumple zone is a bit more important, in which case Aptera has a far larger rear crumple zone than even my Model 3. Numbers don't lie. Pickup trucks are the most selling. In the U.S. at least, yeah. Unfortunately. So that's, there's a lot of people that buy trucks, and I don't think they're all just buying them for ego, although that probably does inflate the number. But that's why, Tello is trying to make a vehicle that can still be super practical, just without all of the ego danger attached to it. Semis are the king of the road, and it doesn't matter if you have a Hummer EV, you're going to lose. Especially with the increase of Tesla semis on the road. Those things can go up to 82,000 pounds. So if someone's driving that thing around and you run into that, you're going to lose even with your big, fat, heavy truck. Even if it's lifted, even if you have a big old engine, even if you're way off the ground, you're still going to lose. They've got more inertia. They've got more weight. So I don't think we should design vehicles based on how they perform in head-on collisions with each other. Make them as safe as you can, but not at the expense of the most common crash situations. Sorohan, I think is his name. Do you know why I got the spring update, but then it just disappeared? Then I went to install it. Yeah, you're not the only one. Other people in the chat have said that they pulled the update, so there must be something wrong with it. I don't know. There might be a bug. Truck is the thing because it's the American way and you can't change that. Yeah, but we can try to, I think, highlight the disadvantages of it better by offering vehicles with similar or better capability, while making them smaller, because then it just it shines a light and exposes the main motivation behind those trucks. If you can say, hey, my Tello has a bigger bed than your truck and it's smaller, and it costs less, both up front and to operate. If we can start using those kinds of arguments, then be like, so why did you buy that big, expensive truck? Is your transmission gone out again? Oh, how's those oil changes treating you? Oh, I heard your brake pads wore out. I don't have to worry about those things because I have a Tello or I have an all-electric truck. While they might be hesitant to that change, similar with earlier EVs, the argument is going to be harder and harder because they're just going to have to fall back to, well, yeah, but I need the gas. I like the smell of gas. And it's like, you like paying $5 a gallon for that? And they're like, yes. They're like, okay, well, you like revving it up. You like wasting your money. That's fine by you. But I don't think personally you can ever advertise someone. Like if someone really loves, I have those friends in my life. I know lots of people that drive big old fat diesel trucks and they love them and they lift them and they work on them. I don't think you're going to talk that guy. You're not going to reason with him into buying an EV. The best way to get that guy interested in EVs is to just own them and use them and showcase how easy they are to maintain. Just talk about how it works for you. I think that argument or that advertising technique, there's no better. I don't know who said this. Maybe I came up with it. I don't think I did. This is a horrible live stream. Why are you guys watching this? Thank you, by the way, for tuning in. Someone said this at one point, but there's no better slap in the face than silent success, which means that even if your EV is better, even if it's more affordable, easier to run, and it's easy to do road trips and stuff, if you go around bragging, what's the term? If you go around bragging, my EV is so much better than your truck. Why did you buy that truck? You're stupid. You know, if you go on the offense and try to convince everybody around you to buy an EV, it's not going to work. You're immediately going to put them in a defensive position. They're going to cling on to any news, any negative headlines they've ever heard. Again, I don't think misinformation changes people's behavior all that much because they're going to cling on to whatever fits their narrative best. People are going to believe what they want to believe. If they see a news article disproving what they believe, they're going to say, oh, can we trust that source? And then if they see a news article that supports what they believe, they'll say, hey, look, an accurate source. This is just how people are. Not just Americans, by the way. I think this is a human problem. The best way, I think, to get people interested and curious about EVs is not to push it on them, not to ban gas cars by 2035. It's just let the EV community do its thing. Let us enjoy them. When people, I visited family last weekend from out of town, and they were actually agreeing with me. I was telling them about my new job at Tello and stuff, and they were like, yeah, I think trucks are way too big. Why have they gotten so big? And, you know, I told them the specs and they were blown away by it. So they were very curious about the Tello, actually. But they asked me when, you know, we were watching TV or something in an ad for a BMW iX or something, you know, some all-electric car came on. And they looked at me and they were like, well, you think that's the future? Is that where everything's headed? And my response was not, yes, it's definitely going that direction. And I would encourage you guys to kind of model this behavior as well, because I do think it's far more effective. It may be slower, but I do think it gets the gears in people's head turning. When they asked me, do you think EVs are the future? Is that where everything's headed? My answer was, I really like them. And I think that says everything. It just says, you know, if you want to keep paying for gas and oil changes and brake pad replacements and transmission failure and all the head gaskets, blowout, all of those things, do you want to keep driving gas cars like that? Go for it, man. That's your choice. It's free market. You do your thing. But I personally enjoy not having to worry about all those things. I enjoy being able to plug in and charge from home. I enjoy the road trip being planned for me with automatic route planning. I enjoy paying for electricity instead of gasoline. I enjoy the lower maintenance. I enjoy the ride quality, the low center of gravity, the silence. These are just things about it that I like. You don't like that? That's fine. You do you. But this is what I like. And I think they'll be far more open to it if you have that kind of attitude. If you come at it on the offense with like, yes, and you need to buy an EV next year or you're an idiot. You know, if you come at it like that, they're not going to... People don't remember everything you say, but they never forget the way you make them feel. A friend of mine said that, and it really stuck with me a couple weeks ago. You know, humans are fickle. We don't have good memory, but positive and negative association sticks with us a lot more than what words are actually said. You know, I've probably told a few dozen of my friends that I've met up with in the past week about my new job. They don't remember what the specs of the Tello are. They don't remember the price. They don't remember the bed. But they do remember Drew's excited about that, and he seems to think that's going to be a big future for us. So I'm going to keep an eye on that because I'm curious about the future of vehicle design being rethought from the ground up instead of just taking existing truck design and slapping batteries on the inside. Let's rethink what the capability is. And that's what excites me the most about, I think, the Tello truck is that you legitimately couldn't build a Tello truck with a combustion engine. It's not possible. It could only be done electric. I don't think we could say the same thing about the Cybertruck. I love the truck. I love the way it looks. It's very iconic, and I point them out every time I see them on the road. But this was a very futuristic, Elon Muskified apocalyptic design based on what, in my opinion, is a dated form factor, the F-150, which was built from the ground up for a combustion engine. And sure, they may have rethought every angle of it, which I think has mainly been beneficial for marketing reasons. But you could fit a combustion engine up here if you really wanted to. This could be a gas truck, and Rich Rebuilds might very well make one of those someday. I already talked to some of my friends that are like, oh, dude, I love the Cybertruck, but I don't want it to be an EV. It's like, I'm waiting for someone to build a Cybertruck that they can turn into a V8, that with big smokestacks coming out the back. The Tello, there's no room. You'd have to take up the whole bed if you wanted it to be a combustion engine. Like Freak Waka says, you can't sell people on specs. You sell people an idea and back that idea up with specs. Exactly. That's thank you. That's exactly how I feel. What's the target range at max payload? So there's a difference between towing max payload and bed space max payload. So don't quote me on this because I don't have the number right off the top of my head. And of course, they're all target specs. They might change. They might get better. They might get a little worse depending on how mass manufacturing goes. But I think the bed payload is around 1,600 pounds. But weight does not affect your efficiency all that much. It has a little bit of an effect, but at highway speed, your aerodynamics takes the biggest hit. So if you're just loading up a bunch of stuff in the bed of the truck of the Tello, I don't expect it to have a substantial hit on your range, maybe 10 or 20%. If you're towing, that's typically when you add a bunch of, frontal area, and now you have a whole different coefficient of drag. That's usually when EVs see a big drop in their range numbers, is that trailer, because it's throwing off the aerodynamics. And by the way, that's the same with gas vehicles too. It's not as noticeable because there's so much efficiency loss with the combustion engine. So the gas vehicles don't have a huge incentive to be super aerodynamic because most of that loss is all coming down to the combustion engine. But with an EV, the powertrain is so efficient that the biggest loss becomes the aerodynamic, because you have like 90-95% efficiency with battery pack to powertrain to wheels to moving them on the ground. So at max payload, I don't expect the range to be that much worse. I still think you'll probably get somewhere in the ballpark of 250 to 300 miles of range with a bunch of stuff in the bed. But again, that's speculative on my part. I'm on Tailosive right now. I'm not speaking as Tello. That should be noted, by the way. Anything I say on Tailosive EV or Tailosive Tech, any of the Tailosive channels, is not a representation of how Tello feels as a brand, as a company. That's not what I say things, and they're my own opinion. Tello can have their own public statements, and lots of people can represent Tello publicly. I'm just waiting for the $80,000 Cybertruck. Yeah, that would be substantially cheaper than the Foundation series for sure, but still up there, still kind of pricey. Peter, hey Peter, he says aloha. Is that the Peter from Hawaii? When's your next road trip? Tomorrow, actually, we're filming some stuff that I won't talk about yet, but you'll see later. We do have a pretty big road trip out to Colorado planned for later this year. We're going to be all in-person podcast, maybe a couple actually. We might be able to do 2 or 4 podcasts all in person with Randy and Mike, because we're all going to be going out there. If all goes according to plan. Plans are still being made, and we're not exactly sure where everybody's going to be, but we're shooting for an all in-person podcast, probably several in the month of September. So that's going to be a big road trip. I've never driven to Colorado before, but I'm very excited. It'll pretty much be the biggest road trip I've ever done. So expect a whole vlog on that. Let's see. Congratulations on the telejob. Thanks, Peter. I'm wondering if that's the Peter in Hawaii I know, or is that a different Peter? Mike in the Woods says, how long do you think Fisker Oceans will drop in price? Got some listed locally for 45,000 Canadian dollars. Is it bad? I'm tempted if the price keeps going down as a unique collector's item. Yeah, it's kind of a gamble. I would be hesitant just because there's a possibility that they could send out a software update that kind of bricks them, or I've already heard people are having a hard time registering them, so some of them are being driven around illegally because they never got the official long-term license plates from the company. So it would be interesting. I'm very curious, by the way. I've been watching several channels that are kind of covering what's going on with Fisker, and while I'm not willing to buy one myself, I am super interested to see what happens to the oceans, because it's going to be the classic documentation of what everybody's been asking. What happens if you buy an EV from one of these startups and they don't stick around? I would say that, yeah, I would agree that I mean, I don't know how to take apart EVs, and I don't know if you guys do, so that should be up for discussion if you're thinking about buying one. But if you know how to take apart an EV and get the high voltage battery pack out of it, and if you think there's someone out there that might be interested in that high voltage battery pack, that in itself could be fairly valuable. Some of these Fisker Oceans have 80 or 113 kilowatt hour battery packs in them. That sounds valuable to me, but I don't know what they would go for in the used market or the EV parts market, because it could be a battery pack that never fits in another vehicle again. In which case its life is reduced to, this is pretty much only good for energy storage, home storage, in which case you got to know somebody that really knows how to do that themselves, because you're not going to be able to just call, I don't know, Sunrun or some Powerwall company that's like, oh yeah, do you already have your battery? Let me turn that into home storage for you. No, so there's a lot of questions that I don't know the answers to, and I probably never will. But these are the questions that if anybody out there is thinking about buying a used Fisker Ocean, especially Mike in the Woods, if you're thinking about buying one for your channel, these are things you should think about looking into. Like, am I interested in tearing apart an EV? Do you know people or want to learn more about how to rig up home energy storage? In which case, you might be able to sell someone on it. Like, I can make a 100 kilowatt hour power wall for your house. But you're going to need software that knows how to manage it and all that. So there's a lot of intricacies that might make for a really fun YouTube series. But again, it's a risk. It's certainly a risk. Cybertruck appears to have zero practical appeal, just fickle fad. Efficiency is the way of the future. Well, I don't completely agree with that. I do think there is some utility to the Cybertruck. I just think that it's bigger than it needs to be. Like, smart design is more what Tello's going for, where you have redundancy of like, okay, when you need 5 seats, you fold that midgate up. But if you want an 8-foot bed, then you fold that midgate down. So you squish down on the big bed capability and the seats, because rarely do you need to move around 8-foot, 4-foot by 8-foot sheets of plywood and have 5 people in the car. So by designing a vehicle that can have 2 people in the car and 4 by 8-foot sheets of plywood, but it can also turn into 5-foot bed with 5 seats if you do need to move more people around. Yeah, it's just flexibility, redundancy, dual functionality, so that you can make a more compact footprint. And honestly, the Cybertruck does still have, a 6-foot bed. It's got a nice large payload capacity at 2,500 pounds. It's got over 10,000 pounds of towing capacity. So for short distance towing, if you're not road tripping, that's going to be very helpful and very useful to a lot of people. Of course, we all want more range, but energy density of cells is just not quite there yet. But I would appreciate the fact that the Cybertruck doesn't have paint. It sounds like the steel has a new set of problems, but I would rather have durable, rigid steel than paint that could get easily scratched. But that's just me. How can Tesla improve Model S and X to be more desirable? Model 3 now is more desirable than a Model S, for example. Yeah, I did a whole wish list video on that. It was a while ago, so you might have to scroll back a little ways to find it. But if you look up Tailosive EV Model S and X refresh wish list or something like that, you might find it. But I suggested they should switch them to higher voltage architecture so they can do faster charging. I would switch them over to either bigger battery packs or more energy dense cells so that they could get longer range out of them. I think that would absolutely make people more willing to pay top dollar for them if they knew that the range was substantially better. And if they could steal and maybe reverse engineer a little bit of the Porsche Taycan battery packs. Porsche has this incredible battery management system that's able to maintain the charging curve incredibly deep into the pack so that it maintains, like 250 kilowatts all the way up to 50%, which Teslas just don't do. I'm pretty sure it comes down to the BMS. I don't think there's something special about the cells themselves, or the battery pack chemistry. It's not that, it's not that different from what's already on the market. It's just that they must have a very, very good thermal system in place. I don't exactly know how they're able to do it, but I'm shocked personally that Tesla is this like industry leader of EVs, and they have these higher price vehicles that are supposed to be like, Model 3 and Y are good for the masses, but the S and X are supposed to be a little bit more bougie. And I think that, sure, it's good to have, fancier seats or more screens or more interior space and that kind of thing, but you should also bougie up the internals a little bit. Give them a really great charging curve. Give them steer-by-wire. Beef up those displays, beef up those give them a front bumper camera, give them ambient lighting, that kind of thing. There's all kinds of things I think they could do. They just don't feel like doing because it probably takes engineering time, and then they have to shut down the factory for a while. But if you reach a drop off in demand at a certain point where just nobody's buying them, then it starts to make sense to let's just retrofit the assembly line because we have enough inventory on hand to just keep up with the demand in the meantime. But then, of course, the news and the leaks and the rumors gets out around about that, and then people are buying less of them. But I think we'll probably reach that point if we're being honest. I don't think Tesla will just straight up stop making the Model S and X. I could be wrong. But my gut hunch is that they're waiting to get to a point where the demand for the S and X has just dropped off to such an extent that nobody's buying them, and then they'll be able to justify, okay, demand is low enough, let's just update the factory line with higher voltage wiring and steer-by-wire and bumper camera and ambient lighting and all those changes we talked about. Hussiel, thank you for joining the stream. He said, if Aptera reached out to you like Tello did, would you take that second position and work both companies, YouTube's and X's? As much as it hurt me to lose you regularly, I'd be happy seeing you with them. I don't think they would be up for it, and I'm not sure I would either. Personally, I should just say that I think Aptera's marketing team has done a fantastic job. I just was listening to the Aptera Owners Club interview with Chris Anthony this morning. He just announced they surpassed 48,000 paid reservations. Okay, and they've raised over $100 million just from crowdfunding, which is basically one of the largest crowdfunding rounds in human history. It's insane what they've done, and that's all because of their great marketing team that got the word out about the product and got people excited about it and got people putting down deposits and stuff. So as much as I love the Aptera and I want my vehicle and I would drive it around today if I could, actually today would have been perfect because my wife was driving to work and I needed to film some stuff at my grandma's place. So today would have been a perfect day for the Aptera for me, and I want it as quickly as possible. So please, Aptera, Godspeed. As much as I love that product and that company, and I appreciate all the transparency they've provided, I genuinely don't think there's that much I can offer them. I think all I would basically do for Aptera is make videos that I'm already making. So they probably saw that. I mean, I'm not trying to shy away from it. They probably saw that, hey, well, Drew's going to just keep saying nice things about us anyway. So they probably see it as we reimburse him through the referral program, through the Aptera points. That's kind of how we hired Drew, because I, of course, as a content creator, have a lot to benefit from referral programs. So I'm grateful that they offered that and doubled down on it, and they seem to still want to honor that, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And I told them to get rid of it. I said, even without a referral program, I would still want to buy an Aptera. I would still want one. So, I think I straight up had the CEO on my channel, and I was like, we want you guys to exist. So if you need to secure profitability and profit margins, it's okay if you don't go through with the referral program. And he said, no, it's worth it. It does wonders for our marketing and gets the word out about us and brings the community together. So they decided to stick with it. So the main reason I was very excited and very happy at the opportunity to work with Tello is I didn't feel like they had much of an online presence. You know, when they reached out to me, there was no YouTube account. They just didn't have one. So there was no TikTok account. There was no Facebook page. There was no. I think that's everything. Is there? Yeah. Basically, even if you had happened to heard of them, like it was rare. Most people were not aware of Tello and what they were working on and what they were doing, and they reached out to me saying, you know, we want someone that can kind of engage with the community and get the word out about our brand and our product and what we're doing here. And because I was like, yeah, I do think y'all need some help. I think you do have an amazing product on your hands, but not enough people are aware of it, and the community should really kind of wake up to these ideas that you're pitching out there about space efficiency with energy efficiency. And I didn't feel like the product overlapped much with really anything else on the market. I was like, this is kind of a new, uncharted, underserved piece of the automotive space that needs more attention. So it felt like a better fit. I asked Aptera. I was like, you know, if you had anything in mind for me, you know, speak now. And they were like, no, no, we think you should do it. They're in a position right now where they're not exactly hiring people, and I don't blame them because Aptera's focus with now their new production funding on the way, they don't need more marketing people, honestly. But over 48,000 reservations is incredible for a startup, and they don't. They don't need more people to put down deposits because they've got the demand. Their current factory with multiple shifts running every day, I think, could potentially do like 20,000, maybe on the upper end 30 or 40,000 units a year. So even if they shut off Aptera orders right now, they would still have a multi-year backlog. So demand is not their issue. Right now, Aptera's focus is on getting vehicles into production, getting vehicles out. And so all of the money and all of the people that they're hiring right now are diverted towards engineering, mass production. They're in the I'll probably do a video on this later about all the stages a startup goes through. I know there's been a lot of comparisons and talk about Aptera and Tello on today's live stream, but I do have to confess, Aptera is in a much different stage of startup than Tello is right now. Tello's much earlier in the development phase, which is why it's kind of exciting to join on board, is because this is kind of the first of a lot of things. You know, I started, me personally, started the Tello Trucks TikTok account. I started the Tello Trucks Facebook page and their YouTube account. I created all those. And even if they don't keep me on long term, I will always be able to say, I created that first channel. I created that first page. You know, I created that OG account to kind of get them going, get them off the ground. So that's an exciting stage to be in too. But Aptera is very much in the gearing up for mass production phase, where it's looking fairly likely, like next year, they're going to be able to deliver these things at scale. So I think that both companies are very exciting. Both companies are very congratulatory towards the other. Tello employees have told me how much they appreciate and love the Aptera, and they wish them all the best. And I've heard the same thing from Aptera employees, having spoken to both companies. They're both very happy that the others are pursuing more efficient vehicles. It's just Tello's focus is a bit more on, you know, 5-seater pickup truck that's space efficient. Aptera's focus is on energy efficiency. You know, not trying to throw shade or anything, but the Aptera isn't quite as space efficient. It is a pretty wide vehicle at 87 inches. So for people who maybe have narrow parking spaces, or people that want more than 2 seats, the 3-wheeled Aptera may not be the best suit for a lot of people. So they're both using first principles to tackle underserved portions of the market, which is why I'm excited for both. And I don't think they really compete with each other in that regard. They're kind of going after very different things. Down the road, it might get a lot more spicy. Who knows? If Aptera starts working on something that's not a 3-wheeler, or Tello starts working on something that's not a truck but is more space and energy efficient. Okay, yeah, that game on. You know, this is the best thing about competition, right? Is that we have very talented, capable companies working against each other both trying to compete to create the better product so that you guys have excellent, great options to choose from. That's that's an exciting future in my opinion. It's like kind of how like Lucid started out with their super efficient high range sedan, the Lucid Air, and Rivian started out with the R1T pickup truck. Don't really compete all that much, right? Very different products. But then the follow up generation, Rivian R1S, 3-row SUV, Lucid Gravity, 3-row SUV. Okay. Yeah, so the first generation is very different. Second generation, okay, there's a bit more overlap here. I guess you go with the R1S if you're more into off roading, go with the Gravity if you want more range, more luxury feel. So you got options instead of just the Tesla Model X. I hope you like Falcon wing doors. So options are good, you know. Um, I think the Taycan battery does have more cobalt, and that contributes to faster charging. That might be why Tesla doesn't want to do that. I can understand that. Still, even if they can't utilize more of the cobalt and stuff, I think that a higher voltage architecture on the Model S and X that enables them to charge at like 350 kilowatts with V4 deployments, hopefully getting those kinds of speeds, that would be a good way to justify the additional expense. If you think the Cybertruck is big, remember they shrank it by 5%, so it could have been 5% bigger. I know, but if you recall watching my videos over the years, there were several times where I straight up was saying, um, uh, sorry, people are texting me now. I was straight up saying, the Cybertruck is cool, but I wish it was smaller, and I would be very interested in a. Elon at Battery Day made a reference to a Wolverine style global edition of the Cybertruck that would be smaller, and I was very excited by that, and I was pushing for that, and I was speculating and hoping that Giga Mexico would make a smaller size pickup truck because that's what I'm most interested in. I hope it's been made clear on this channel. I've been very consistent on that over the years. I've always wanted a smaller truck. This is not just the job offer Drew suddenly becomes interested in the Tello. It's like, no, I really wanted this thing long before they gave me the job. Um, Comment on the green energy battery storage fire in SoCal. I don't know much about that one, but I guarantee you there's been more fires caused by combustion engines than by battery storage. But yeah, I haven't looked it up yet. I don't know much about the situation, but yes, batteries do catch fire. Although most battery storage systems going in the ground now use lithium iron phosphate, which are far less likely. So, again, like most things, it shouldn't be looked at as one isolated instance. Let's write off the whole technology. We should look at the overall consensus. And I'm sure power plants have caused issues in the past too, coal ones. And there's a cost of having a non-renewable resource to power energy as well. In the same regard that nuclear power plants have had problems doesn't mean we shouldn't pursue nuclear energy. And this, I'd probably say the same thing about battery storage plants. I'm not saying they're perfect and flawless, because batteries do catch fire sometimes. You mass produce something, and there can be inconsistencies and bad yields in the product, and that results in a puncture or whatever. But lithium iron phosphate, the same kind of battery pack in my Model 3, is a much more stable chemistry. And I think earlier battery storage systems relied more on nickel, which made them more prone to catching fire. But as of lately, they've been switching more and more of the new battery storage systems to LFP, and those should be far less likely to catch fire. But yeah, there have been more than one instance. There's even been instances of solar panels, I think, catching fire. But again, look at the data and see, okay, how common is it? How isolated is it? Same thing with, do EVs catch fire? Yes, they have. It's 10 times less likely than a combustion engine catching on fire, but yes, they do happen. Let's see. It's not the size of the battery, but the added weight because beefy charging equipment in the car. Oh, interesting. So you're saying that the charging curve could be better if they beefed up the BMS, which is, I think, what I was alluding to earlier. If they're asking about what consumers want, the best CarPlay experience in any pickup truck would be quite the selling point for this user. Which user? For real, do? Yeah, they haven't. EVs today can already take advantage of the speeds, not to mention their own Cybertrucks. Yeah, the Cybertruck apparently is capable of charging much faster than it is today, but they need to get a move on the infrastructure. The infrastructure is still not caught up. Pretty much every time you charge a Cybertruck at a supercharger, it has to split the pack voltage in half, um, which is not ideal for the best charging curve. If you take a Cybertruck to a 350 kilowatt Electrify America station, then it will actually charge around 330 kilowatts, which is funny that at the non supercharger, the Cybertruck will charge faster. But wait, he said, don't comment on the $30,000 Kia EV3. What? He helped Tello say hello to the digital world. I know. There's so many hello jokes to make. But that works. There's a lot of good ways to greet people. I don't know much about the Kia EV3 other than it looks like a very small EV9, which I like. But yeah, I don't know. There's too many EVs. I can't have an opinion on every single one. Some of them fall into that Blazer effect, which Mike knows all too well, which is just that, at least on paper, nothing about this really stands out in any significant way, so I need to test drive it before I can formulate some kind of, oh, it's good for this. And a lot of the time that turns into, well, it's good if you like Kia. If you're a fan of Kia and you like Kias, then you will like the Kia EV3. That's sometimes what it turns into. But what really occupies my mind the most is when we kind of reinvent form factors and rethink EVs from the ground up, to unlock some functionality or utility that wasn't previously available. So those ones stand out to me the most. I guess the thing that's supposed to stand out about the EV3 is the price, which again is always hard to know for sure when it's just an announcement, because usually by the time these things get to dealer lots, especially if it's a legacy automaker, then it's not $30,000, which is why it's hard to get excited for. But got to admit, I hadn't heard of Tello till I heard it from you. I was eyeballing Canoo, but reserved to Tello because of your reference. What do you think is the main factor separating Tello from Canoo? Ooh, good question. Yeah, I think Canoo, unfortunately, I'm still a shareholder of Canoo. I think they went public way too fast, and I think they were way too distorted on their product lineup. I mean, I remember following them in the early days. They said they didn't even want to sell cars. They said we were just going to have a autonomous lifestyle vehicle that was just a little boxy. I'm not exactly sure if that helped much with coefficient of drag or if it helped much with manufacturing, but they liked this bubbly looking Apple car design. They really seemed to like that look, and they kept it going with all these other products. They made a truck, they made a sedan concept that they teased several times, and they made a delivery van out of it, and they seemed to just like this iconic visibility thing, which is cool because it's supposed to let you see what's in front of you a lot better. But they just have kind of a lot of empty space in the front, and it's not an inherently efficient vehicle. It's not terribly high range considering the battery pack. I believe it's an 80 kilowatt hour pack that gets 250 miles of range, which is not great. Let me reverse the math on that. 250 mile range with an 80 kilo. Yeah, so it's about 3.1 miles per kilowatt hour, which is not bad by any means, but it's also not great. So I don't know. I think they were trying to go for some kind of quicker path to production, but I don't know if it really worked out for them because it resulted in not a lot of vehicles being made and not a lot of vehicles being delivered. And it just seemed like they had too many vehicle designs all at once. And they weren't quite sure which one to lead with, but I don't know. They're not incredibly transparent with their community, in my opinion. They just kind of occasionally post little updates, but then they just go super quiet, and it's hard to know exactly what's going on over there. But I know their cash is low, and doesn't seem like they're able to ramp production that quickly. But I don't know. Maybe there's more going on behind the scenes. They're just not talking about it. I feel like they would want to talk about it, but yeah, I think I'm glad to hear that you reserved one. I think that's part of the reason Tello offered me the job, was because they did realize that a huge chunk of people were discovering this company because of my videos on them. So they were like, well, if a lot of people know Tello because of you, you should probably just be part of the team because people are going to recognize you. Um, but yeah, I think the intention is for Tello to have CarPlay, but it's not a lock yet. Like the supplier for it has not been hammered down quite yet. So the intention is to have CarPlay and Android Auto, but we'll see. Things could change. So don't like assume it's locked in. Best EV truck: small 800 volt, large bed, and 150 kilowatt hour battery. Tesla should do a radical Model Y refresh, make it more boxy and R2 size, no matter of the bean shape. Yeah, I feel like that might make it very close to a Rivian R2, which you don't want to copycat everybody. I do think though Tesla should make a proper 3-row SUV that's meant to be more affordable. That seems to be a very popular segment. The Rivian R1S is selling incredibly well, especially for its price. And if Tesla took everything they learned from the Cybertruck or from the Model Y and just put that into a efficient, well, relatively efficient. It probably won't be as efficient as a Model Y, but just put that into a capable 3-row SUV of some kind that's not, $80,000-$70,000, but more closer to $60,000 or $50,000. I think it would sell incredibly well, but Elon doesn't seem to want to do that. He wants Robotaxi. Tello versus Canoo. No comment. No, I did a video on that. I did a whole video before I was hired by Tello. I did a video comparing the Tello truck to the Canoo pickup truck, and it was abundantly clear that the Tello truck, at least on paper, because both trucks are in the development phase. Neither truck is out yet, which is why I thought it would be kind of fun to compare them. But at least on paper, the Tello truck won in like every regard. The Tello truck had the bigger bed. The Tello truck had I think it had the lower price, had the better range, better efficiency. I think better off-roading capability, thanks to Tello's going to have really good. I can't confirm numbers yet because they're not locked in, but all I can say is that the Tello truck is going to have very good departure and approach angles because those tires go right to the edges. Like those tires on the Tello go way to the back and way to the front, and that helps a lot off-road because you're not going to be hitting the front or the back as easily. That's part of the reason Jeeps are able to do so well off-road is because of their approach and departure angles. So R3 all day. Oh yeah, I'd love I love the R3. I wish they would make that before the R2 personally, but a little bit of bias speaking here. Keep in mind, Tello employee, so I'm biased. But the Tello is actually shorter than a Rivian R3. So if you like the R3 because it's small, Tello's smaller. And it has a bed. It's, a truck instead of a crossover. But Tesla should get into the van segment. Yeah, they've said they would. They've teased it several times. But again, Robotaxi, top priority. Tomorrow, next week, you guys, this new version is going to change everything. I prefer the R3's control scheme. I like the stocks, man. But if it were a 2023 or older Model 3, I'd go for that. I prefer the software. Yeah, I understand. I understand where you're coming from. I wouldn't mind having no stocks if I have steer-by-wire. That's kind of the opinion I think I've landed on. After trying, I've driven a recent generation Model X and S, and I've driven the latest Model 3. And yeah, for the most part, I could live with capacitive buttons. Like, it's not the end of the world, but I do think that gear stocks are better, with the exception of steer-by-wire, because with my main complaint wasn't about changing directions. It's like, you really don't even do that all that much, and the car's pretty good at guessing which direction you need to go. At least in my experience, it was pretty good at it. The most annoying thing about no stocks, in my experience, is that when you're driving either through a roundabout, which there's actually a couple in my town, or you're navigating a parking lot or something, and you're moving the steering wheel around like this, but then you need to press the blinkers. That's the most annoying part to me. Is like, okay, I turned the wheel around like this, but now I need to press the left blinker, but now the blinker buttons are backwards, so I have to press the right arrow to signal left. That gets old really fast, and I didn't even have that much time with the Model 3 refresh, and I was already getting like, wait, oh, right, push this one. I'm sure I could get used to it. Again, I don't think it's a deal breaker. I think people turn it into a bigger thing. Like, I would never buy that unless they had gear stocks. Then I'll buy one right away. I don't think most people are that gun ho about it. But when you have steer by wire and most of your turning is like this, even in a tight parking lot, and you're mostly just turning around like this, then you can keep your hands at 9 and 3 pretty much at all times, and you can reach the blinkers with your thumb no problem. So in the Cybertruck, I didn't mind it so much because most of the time, Cybertruck has a really tight turning radius, so most of the time you're not going to be turning it at full clock. But even if you did, you could probably still press the buttons right there. Which is why I'm very grateful that the Aptera, while you do change the direction of the Aptera on the display, you can signal with the blinker. There's still a blinker for signaling and lights, and I think it does a couple other things. But I wouldn't mind having no stocks if it were a physical click like the truck. Yeah, I never noticed a big difference personally, but Robo taxis tomorrow. Let's see. The ID buzz has grown on me. Uh-oh. Other Mike isn't going to like that. Some soap and bristle brushes should help with that issue. Full lock. Sorry. That's what I meant. Who uses blinkers when they're driving around or parking lots? Well, when you're coming out of a parking lot, sometimes you're coming out at an angle. Honestly, to me, it happens all the time at superchargers. You're leaving the supercharger and you're kind of coming out at an angle, but you have to be mid-turn as it's going on. So if you want to know my preferences, by the way, I don't know if I should be sharing this, but Tello seems very interested in having stocks. I don't think they're going to do a yoke or a... But I'll stop there. I don't want to get fired in my first week. Yeah, the R3's control scheme looks cool, though. I love the little dials. You can just scroll up and down. And how they change with the Taptic engine. I'm sure they put a lot of time and effort into that, but yeah, the Rivian steering wheel looks dope. I can't wait to drive one around. I really want to try it. Do I think Tesla should improve basic autopilot if they really want to sell FSD basic autopilot? Are you quoting me? I'm pretty sure I've said this in the past. But yeah, I wish they could take the release stack of version 12.4 and just tell that software, now just do autopilot features, just stay between the lanes, but do everything else the same. But I'm guessing it's not that simple. That's part of my prediction, is that this FSD is such a big fundamental rewrite that you can't just tweak it like that. You can't just say, okay, still drive around, but now just don't do this, that, or the other thing, which is part of the reason I think robotaxis are going to take a lot longer to go mainstream than people think, is because it's nothing but neural nets, which is cool, but also that means it's very hard to tweak after the fact. So if your Tesla with full self-driving makes some weird turn or makes a mistake at an intersection, because none of the code is written by humans anymore, or at least very little of the code is written by humans, it's just this big neural net they're trying to train with as much data as possible. You can't just go in and say, oh, don't do that. You can't say like, oh, don't hit the parking barrier, or don't do that at this intersection. It's not that simple. Now it's like, okay, well, let's give it a bunch of data of that exact situation and hope that it interprets that data correctly. But it's not an exact do this, then that kind of coding. I'm confident that Tello and Aptera will keep their promised prices because battery prices have dropped so much since they decided on their prices. Well, I wouldn't be so certain, just because, that didn't happen with Tesla. And when startups are young and they don't have a lot of consistent revenue yet, it makes sense to kind of charge a bit more for the earlier launch editions, just because you know that your diehard fans are going to pay it, and your capital expenses go really, really high typically right when mass production starts. So I'm not revealing anything by saying that, but I'm just saying keep an open mind. I don't think you should just look at battery prices and assume, okay, they'll keep prices the same. There's a lot more that goes into the price of the vehicle than just the cost of materials. There's other factors that go into that. Make sure the Tello doesn't have a start button. I haven't we haven't talked about that. I haven't heard about that. All I'm just gonna say is keep in mind Well, I'll make suggestions and encourage things along the way. I did not design the thing. I am not the designer. I'm not even on the design team. So just keep that in mind. But I will do my best. I will absolutely ask them stuff. Yeah, just use voice commands to use turn signals. Um, People are hyping up hydrogen semi, but all the hydrogen semis have 400 miles, while Tesla semi has 500. Why would you pay more for less? I don't know much about the hydrogen semis. I thought they went further than that, but that's not really the bigger issue with the hydrogen fuel cell trucks. I think the bigger issue is the cost of operations, but Nikola has consistently impressed me. You know, they definitely had a lot of fraud with Trevor Milton and a lot of sketchy stuff going on when he was at the company. But ever since Trevor Milton left, they've delivered trucks. They've made Nikola trays, and they've started delivering, I believe, their first hydrogen fuel cell semi truck. So I don't think they're the long haul ones that they initially promised. Um, but Nikola has surprised me. So I'm still pretty skeptical of hydrogen fuel cells as a sustainable long-term business model, just because inherently hydrogen costs more than diesel. So I don't envision a scenario where a lot of trucking companies want to buy fuel cell vehicles because they're going to cost more than their diesel ones, whereas the electric ones would cost less. So there's financial incentive for lots of businesses and companies to buy electric semi trucks, but there's not a lot of incentive for them to buy hydrogen stations. Sorry, no, I am not the CEO of Tello Trucks. I apologize. Um, yeah, publicly we have stated Tello will come standard with the NACS port, as at least that's what they've told me thus far, unless something changes down the road, which I will keep you updated on if anything does. But so far, as of the latest conversations we've had, and they've said this in the first video we ever interviewed them with, they've all said they expect the JD3400 connector to be standard. So we shouldn't have any CCS1 telos, hopefully. During the free trial, FSD failed at one intersection every day for me. Got an update and it was fixed. My disengaged data made the system better and it happened fast. That's great. I love it when that happens. I'm happy to say, Curtis, that similar things happened to me. However, new problems came with the new updates as well, where it started failing in places that it used to not fail. So, yeah, hydrogen fuel lines can freeze. Well, that's probably pretty common, right? Because they have to pressurize it, which makes it extremely cold when they refuel it and stuff. Mike says, make sure the design team makes the Tello a hydrogen EV. No! Have you heard Toyota's new ICE engine that they're working on? I can't wait for the day Toyota goes bankrupt, because you know their diehard fans say Toyota can do no wrong. Yeah, I hate to say it, but I do think there will be probably enough demand for gas vehicles to keep them afloat for quite some time. You know, I'll admit, I'll be the first to admit, I don't think I didn't expect EVs demand slump as to be as drastic as they have been. I thought the demand was just going to keep on growing from 2022, which is where it was super high and everybody was trying to get one. I thought that demand trend would continue and it ended up not. I'm not sure if that has everything to do with just interest rates or it has something to do with running out of the enthusiast market and us realizing, okay, now we actually have to really convince people to switch. It's not just a matter of, I hate gas, so I'm willing to put up with EVs and their higher prices or some of their shortcomings. Now it's like, no, now you actually have to be really competitive with gas. So the prices came down and stuff. So because of that, I'm not one of those people that says legacy auto is all going to die off. It's like, there's enough people that will keep buying gas cars to keep them afloat for quite some time, and they'll probably get bailed out if they run low on money anyway. But regarding gear stocks, I like not having to look, turning wipers, changing gears, typing on keyboard, do it without thinking or looking. I think most would agree with you, but many would say that they can do that with buttons, though. There are many people that get a muscle memory with the buttons on the new steering wheels. Particularly easy with the Cybertruck because most of the time your hands are just like this. You don't have to do hand over hand motion. So it's pretty easy to just remember this button is left turn, this button is right turn. A little bit of a learning curve, of course, from the gear stocks, but I agree. I don't think even Tesla would say that they hope that everybody has to look at the steering wheel to signal. um, I'm not that surprised with the with the slump in EV demand, especially in Germany. Politicians here are really bad. Oh, not just there. That's not a Germany problem. That's everywhere. Um, it's price that's slowing down EVs. Toyota has $20,000 to $15,000 cars. I think it's a bunch of things. I don't think it's one single thing. I did a video on that I think a month ago called "The Truth About EV Demand" or something like that. But I think there's probably a very diverse pie chart. I think interest rates is part of it. EV prices is part of it. EV misinformation is part of it. Hesitancy to change is part of it. Unwillingness for people to get off of gasoline is part of it. Maybe some people really don't like Elon, so they don't want to buy a Tesla. I know a lot of people like to think that's not a real thing, but I've met in my personal life many people that have expressed that exact sentiment to me. They love EVs, they love EV brands, and they just don't like Elon. And I don't agree with that. I mean, I don't like Elon either, but I don't think it's worth not buying the product over. I still love my Model 3. I can separate the product from the producer, but some people can't. And you know what? It doesn't matter if you think it's dumb reasoning, it's still a lost sale potentially. Um, Price education and lies from the media. Yeah, it's part of it, but again, I don't think it's the whole picture. Do you think we'll get CarPlay OS updated dub, especially after getting a huge reveal 2 years ago and no follow up last year? My guess is that the incorporation of it ended up being far more complicated than we thought. So no, I don't think they'll talk about it at Dub personally. Um, there literally was a terrorist attack on Giga Berlin, and one of the reasons was Elon. Yeah, I think so. Uh, the Toyota $20,000 to $15,000 cars are not a good comparison with the EVs today. Different class and the size of a car altogether. Mm, Depends on the EV because there's lots of different kinds of EVs. There's some that are very affordable that are pretty close to those prices, and some that are, of course, way above that, which is not worth comparing. But when Tesla's trying to sell, millions and millions of cars a year, you kind of have to compare them to. And again, I actually don't think there's that many new Toyotas selling for $20,000. I haven't seen one. You got dealer markups and gas prices the way they are, but do you think it will be easy to change the steering wheel on the Aptera with DWB not coming standard? I can see it as a nuisance to do 2.x turns with the yoke. Thought? I don't know what DWB stands for, so thank you for asking that for real though. But yeah, I've driven several vehicles with yokes, and I didn't find it that big of a deal personally. It's just a muscle memory thing. It's not something you have to actively look at. You just when you do the turns, you tend to pivot more on the palm, and then it helps with the visibility of the screens, which are your rear cameras, which are important. So yeah, I don't think that the yoke is a deal breaker personally. I would say go try one before you dock it because I know a lot of people that uh, hated on the yoke before they even tried it, and then they tried it and went, okay, actually it wasn't that bad. So if you actually drove around a vehicle with a yoke for a reasonable amount of time and then come back to me and say, no, I don't want a yoke, I could, okay, that's fair. But yeah, they're a right to repair company, so I imagine the aftermarket accessories might be interesting. It might affect your airbag capabilities, but yeah, people put yokes on Teslas all the time, um, and vice versa. They put full steering wheels on Teslas that shipped with yokes. So I think that there will likely be a way to do it. I don't know how easy it'll be, but regarding the Elon 8, has anyone talked to other big auto CEOs? I'm sure they are all pro-labor/union and have the general public in mind with their views. Well, the point I'm trying to make there is that that's the reason so many CEOs and companies leaders are not very outspoken because they know in the regard of political opinions, um, and just how the general public views billionaires in general or rich people or CEOs in general, you can't please everybody. It's not possible, which is why they don't say much and they keep everything middle ground and they keep everything fairly dry and clean cut. And that's why We don't know that much about Tim Cook's opinions on such and such because, for the most part, he just keeps to himself. He doesn't say much. It's the people who are very outspoken that get really into their opinions that are known for being controversial because political topics, in my opinion, are kind of inherently impossible topics. Anything political just means you have two very large groups of people that feel very passionate about their side, and both of those sides disagree, with the other, which is why it's kind of a no-lose situation. And if you're trying to sell people on a product or you're trying to represent a brand, you kind of want to be right down the middle and not be too one-sided or the other because you're going to tick off the other side, which is why most CEOs just avoid being political in the first place. I'm sure behind the scenes they probably agree with a lot of the things Elon says, but we don't know about it. So it's not being talked about, it's not being published. So that's why most people who drive Hyundais probably have no idea who the CEO of Hyundai is. And they like it that way. But if you're a Tesla owner, most of you could probably attest, you could drive around somewhere and someone could walk up to you and say, "Did you hear what Elon said? Did you hear what Elon did?" You'll get that kind of behavior because Elon's very outspoken. Doesn't matter if you agree with his opinions or not, it gets people talking, and then it's in the news, and of course the media, in an attempt to generate more clicks and generate more eyeballs on their sites, they take things out of context. Yes, they are financially motivated to do so. We can shake our fist at the media, but it doesn't change the effects, which is that people don't have time to go on Twitter and read every single thing Elon has ever said. All most people are able to do is read a few headlines here and there. And when they see a negative Elon headline, even if it was taken out of context, even if it's not entirely accurate, the damage is still done. Which is why, in my opinion, regardless of what you think of Elon or agree with him on anything, it's just in general a good idea not to get too political if you're going to be trying to convince millions and millions of people to buy your product. It's best to just kind of stay focused on the mission, stay focused on the product, not dwell too much on tough topics or complex topics or political topics because you're going to tick off a huge crowd either way. Elon is Tesla's marketing department. Yeah, and how's that going? I just think the Aptera steering wheel is ugly. Love the car. It's my dream car, but that steering wheel I think is very ugly. Well, fair enough. It's not for everybody, but I do think there will probably be a way to change it. And I think you should give it a shot before you completely write it off. Most big CEOs only say the bonkers and stains stuff in their own private clubs. Yeah, and that's better. I agree with that. Probably the most insane bonkers stuff I've ever said, I've not said publicly. Because I agree, this medium, having a live stream with public people tuning into the stream, is not the best way to handle a lot of political, religious, all those kinds of controversial topics. I love talking about those subjects. I just don't view this as a good medium for doing so. Like, I should have those talks with my friends or family, one-on-one, face-to-face. I think those conversations are a lot more productive when they're in person and a lot more understanding and respectful when you have to look someone in their eyes and you can really dive deeper into those subjects, and you can see authenticity, whereas there's a lot of bravery and a lot of stupidity that comes from these keyboards and screens that make us feel far more comfortable saying things that we wouldn't ordinarily say. Tim Farley has been very truthful about Ford's products. Fair enough. Elon shouldn't talk about politics too much. I agree. Again, there's some things he said that I don't agree with and some things he said that I do, but again, I just think if you're trying to become a mass market, accessible brand, then most people shouldn't be that intimately aware of your opinions on very, very hot topics. Do you think Elon wants to leave Tesla? No, but I do think he wants to turn Tesla into something that it isn't and shouldn't be. But that's my opinion. I could be wrong on that. Elon is in multiple companies like SpaceX, which is heavily government run. It's government regulated, I would say. I'm not sure if I would say run, but agree. My point is they hate on Elon and Tesla for what he says, while the other CEOs lie about their products, and people seem to like the lies better than the opinions they don't agree with. Well, my point is the squeaky wheel gets the grease, so whoever is louder is going to be dominating the news cycle. So the other CEOs are wisely. We can argue about the ethics of this all day. Yeah, but the other CEOs are just as bad. That may be, but people aren't thinking about them. So when they buy the product, that's not a consideration. If Elon is constantly saying things that gets him in negative headlines and negative news stories, then it's going to be on people's minds more, and it's going to be more of a consideration when they're buying the car. Um, and it already has been. I've talked to several people in my personal life. Again, this is not an online thing. This is not a comment I've read. These are human beings that I've looked at in the face and heard them say, I don't like Elon. I do not want to support him. So I'm not going to buy his product. I like EVs, but I don't want to support him. So it's like, that was a potential sale right there. Could have been selling more cars. How many of it is just that? Who's to say? I don't think it's like 90%. I don't think Tesla sales would be double what they were if it weren't for Elon. But I think that there was probably some measurable increase potentially. Um, Having FU money doesn't excuse firing a bunch of people because you want to save cash because you said things that angered and pushed away many potential buyers and owners of Teslas. Yeah, I agree. I don't think that's a good way to handle it. Anything space related, the government has a hand in. Yeah, it has to because they're technically making kind of intercontinental ballistic missiles. Efficiency aside, forget about it for a second. Do you think the Aptera is a good-looking car, or do you think it's a 3? It is a 3 on looks, but the efficiency is what it bumps it up to a 9 for you. I know Hessiel, I know you don't like the look, but I know you can't stand it, but I genuinely do think it looks beautiful. Seriously, especially after seeing it in person. Seeing it in person made me love it even more. Seeing it in pictures and videos is one thing, but the more I looked at it over time, and like I said, my opinion is very heavily influenced by intentionality. I mean, you might as well be asking me what, is red a better color than blue? It's completely opinionated. If we're talking pure design, it's like my brain is looking for reasons to like one design from the other, and you're trying to articulate the question as in ignoring efficiency. Do you think it looks good? And I'm like, well, it's kind of hard to ignore the intentionality behind it, but it's like saying if you for one, it's very eye catching. It looks like it's kind of floating. I love the fact that there's many angles at the Aptera where you cannot see the back wheel. So it kind of looks like it's just floating across the road, which is really cool. And I love the way that the wheel pants turn in the direction that you're turning. It does look very aerodynamic, which in general, I just think aerodynamic designs look pretty futuristic and cool. So I get it that you're trying to get me to admit that it looks ugly in some regard, and I'm sorry. It's not going to happen. I respect your opinion. You're allowed to not like what I like. That's fine. But yeah, even if we ignored the efficiency, I would have bought, if I was born in a different time, I would have bought the original Aptera, the hybrid one that ran on gas. I still thought that one looked cool. It was on the set of Star Trek, the '09 Star Trek movie. They had an Aptera prototype driving around on set, and I see why. It looks like the future, and I like futuristic looking designs. Still no UI refresh here in Finland. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Heike? Hope I got that correct. The nail that sticks out gets the hammer. Yep, that's a good way of phrasing it, Mike. Thanks for phrasing it that way. Because it's like, yeah, there's still a bunch of screws, or no, not screws. There's still a bunch of sharp nails in the automotive industry. I'm sure there's problems and things we disagree with all those CEOs. But Elon's the one that sticks out. So the media is the hammer, and they're the ones going, bam, So if you blend in with the crowd, people aren't going to take that into consideration. They're not going to like I said earlier in this stream, people don't remember specs. People, the general consumer, maybe nerds like us, we remember specs, but people won't buy a product simply because of the paper, on paper it looks good. But they do remember how products make them feel. It's all about that negative versus positive association, which is why I've encouraged people to not fight EV misinformation with like argumentative tactics. Don't say, no, you're wrong, or you've been fooled by the media. People don't want to hear that, even if it's true. People don't like hearing that they're wrong. And when people ask you, do you think EVs are the future? I think the best answer is, well, I love mine. I don't want to keep paying for gas. I don't want to have to worry about oil changes and brake pad replacements and head gaskets and transmission failure and all that crap. I just I know that this one is incredibly safe. It's very efficient. It's easy to charge. It's very fun to drive. It's quiet, and those are things I care about. So I'm going to keep driving it. You do you. And if you have that positive interaction with people, they're going to be far more open-minded towards it. Um, than if you come at them on the offense and trying to convince them that you definitely need to buy an EV. I'm going to convince you in the next minute that you need to buy one. So similarly, even if you can't expect people to watch every Elon interview. People aren't going to read every Elon tweet, which maybe provides more context on what previous statements were, but interactions were in the past. But when people are reading the news and they see negative headlines about Elon, again, they're not going to remember everything he said, but there will be a negative association with Elon, and therefore that connects to Tesla. So there will be a negative in the similar way that when Jeff Bezos gets negative press, then that carries on to Amazon, even though he's not even really doing much at Amazon anymore. Drew uses hammers on screws. Exactly. I'm glad Mike agrees with me, though. He says Aptera in person is very mesmerizing. Freak Waka says it looks really cool. MC Psych says it looks decent. I'm sorry, Hasiel. I think you might be in the minority. People like the way this thing looks. Alex45 says, I don't agree with the Tesla layoffs at all. Elon demands a lot of commitment from his employees, but doesn't provide much stability with huge layoffs. Not cool. They aren't going bankrupt. I agree. I could understand a bit more of the layoffs if the company was on the brink of, running out of money, but at least from the financials they've showed us, there's been no indication that they were struggling. They had good margins. They had plenty of cash in the bank. And surprisingly, at the last couple earnings calls, there wasn't really much asking about what are you going to do with all this cash. They had like $25 billion in cash. And no one said, what are you going to do with that? They don't have very much debt either. So, in my opinion, the company was not in a financial state where drastic layoffs made sense, which is why the sudden firing of the entire supercharging team felt to me, it felt more like an ego trip than an actual logical decision, which is not the way you want, a $1 trillion brand to be run based on emotion and how Elon's feeling that day. Most of the reports were claiming that it was Elon saying everybody needs to reduce their headcount by 10%, and the lead of the charging team said, no, we can't reduce our headcount by 10% because everybody here is doing a very important job. And then Elon said, well, if you can't fire 10%, then you're all fired. And already it sounded like they've started hiring back a lot of people because they quickly realized this isn't this isn't sustainable. We can't just let go of everybody in charge of charging. So it sounds like Elon, and I'm not the one who came up with this terminology. This was Tim Dodd, the everyday astronaut, who has met Elon several times. He said on a podcast with Lex Friedman that Elon is very much a tornado that comes through these companies and just makes cutthroat, fast decisions, and then everybody else comes in to clean up the mess. So big picture things, Elon gets the ball rolling on very quickly, but then everybody else has to come in at the end and make it work. And I've heard similar stories from Lars. I forget his last name all the time, but Lars is the chief of engineering at Tesla. For now, he hasn't stepped down to spend more time with his family yet, because that's apparently what everybody does. But Lars said on the record in the one of the first Cybertruck interviews that Elon gave us 90 days to come up with the Cybertruck prototype. And he said it has to do this, this, and that. And they were scrambling and they were rushing together that original 2019 prototype to get it to do everything that he said it needed to do. And then basically that was followed by 4 years of, okay, how do we mass produce that design? And they changed almost everything that wasn't the immediate outside appearance. The main goal with the mass production is, okay, it has to look like that prototype, but they changed the motors, they changed the battery pack design, they changed the range, they changed the seating, they changed the interior, they changed the steering wheel, they changed the bed size, they changed the mirrors, the windshield wiper, the tailgate was different, the interior of the bed was different. all these things changed because, you know, they had to find a way to mass produce this vehicle that they had 90 days to scrap together. Um, and effectively, it's great marketing. I'll give them credit. I do think it's a very futuristic, awesome looking design. I still love spotting them out. I still would drive one at any chance I could, but there are a bunch of things that still stand out to me about the Cybertruck that I'm like, yeah, I wish it had more seats if it's going to be that big, or I wish it had a midgate, or I wish it had the tailgate ramp, or I wish it had more underbed storage, or I'm biased again because I work for Tello, but I just feel like there's a lot of specs that could have been much better. It could have been more efficient. It could have been smaller, or it could have done more if they would have had more time, or at least been willing to stray from that original prototype design that they had 90 days to come up with back in 2019. Um, the layoffs were a mistake for sure. Good people can be reassigned if needed. Yeah, but how is the working morale going to be now? I wouldn't be surprised if there were a lot of people that Tesla laid off. Then Tesla said, "Okay, never mind, we need you back." And then those same people said, sorry, found another job, or I don't want to come back." Like, would you want to work at a company where that possibility is always around? Like, it's possible that at any moment Elon could walk in and just fire you right there on the spot, and then you got to find another job. Like, that's got to affect people's opinion of the company, to be fired even if you're rehired back. I just I haven't talked to a really hardcore Tesla bull in a while, but I would like to. I'm very busy now that I'm working. I'm basically working 2 part-time jobs, which equate a full-time job. But my my argument about Elon's time is, I'm not saying like Elon should, just go retire on an island somewhere and do nothing. No, I feel like I've been consistent from the beginning. I've always said Tesla has achieved their mission statement. They've accelerated the transition to sustainable energy. Even if Elon died tomorrow or got abducted by aliens or whatever, that wouldn't change. Tesla's still on track to electrify as much as the world as possible, mass produce battery packs for home energy storage, for Megapack, and get solar panels on people's roofs and deliver affordable mass market EVs. They've done that. They've achieved their mission statement. And I've always come back to SpaceX has not. The mission statement of SpaceX is to make life multiplanetary. That has not happened yet. Elon is an accelerator. Elon is like the crazy guy that's willing to try things, and I think his current set of skills, with willing to rapidly iterate, scrap designs, try out new ones, I think his strengths fit SpaceX the best. Because what you need in a reusable giant, mass producible, reusable rocket industry is someone who's willing to try things, break things, and then try again, and not be afraid of failure, and just keep trying, keep entertaining new ideas, not shying away from anything. And I think that's what Elon's good at, and that's what SpaceX needs the most of, is like rapid iteration, rapid testing, rapid recycling, just go all hands on SpaceX is, I think, what he should do. Plus, if he's got free time, he can work on Twitter, he can work on Boring Company, he can work on Neuralink. There's so much he could do and still do nothing at Tesla. I just think Tesla's a big enough company that's managing so many things all at once, and such a large company at this point, that they would probably be better off without having, the tornado coming through and changing a bunch of things left and right. Like those big layoffs, or coming in and saying, "Okay, design a truck to do this. All right, make it happen. I don't know how you're going to do it, but make it happen." I think Tesla needs their Tim Cook, essentially. Like Apple had their Steve Jobs era, and then they had their Tim Cook era. And I think both are valuable, both are important. You need both. You need an innovator, you need a co-founder to get things off the ground, but then you need someone to manage it and know how to scale it and know how to keep it sustainable and consistent. And I think Tesla's at that phase. Elon doesn't, because Elon thinks long term Tesla's going to be an AI and robotics company, not a car company. And I just happen to disagree. I think Tesla long term is always going to be looked at as an automotive company first, or an energy company at the very least, that focuses on home batteries and solar. Um, and I initially thought Drew Baglino would be the perfect Tim Cook, but he was let go, so I guess that's not happening. But maybe Tom Zhu. Guaranteeing employment for any duration is a bad idea. Really. I mean, it might make people more likely to want to work for you, but the layoffs are necessary for any big company. Otherwise, it gets too bloated. Yeah, but the charging team, I think, felt like more of a crucial part of the business. Be like, you can't just say companies get too bloated and then close all your Tesla service centers. If he did something like that, I think it would have a drastic effect on demand. Not to mention bad press. I think a lot of people were a little nervous about buying a Tesla after they fired the whole charging team. Why do you think Drew was let go? He was a threat to Elon. We'll never know for sure, but I do think with the number of people that have left the company, seemingly voluntarily, to put on some kind of unified front, I guess, I have to feel like there's some kind of fundamental disagreement with the company. With the future of the company. My personal prediction, I could be wrong on this, it's still speculative, but my personal prediction is that Elon said the same thing he said on the earnings call, which is, if you do not believe, 100%, if you do not believe that Tesla will solve autonomy and become a level 5 robotaxi operator across the planet, if you do not believe that will happen, sell the stock. Like, we don't want you, basically, is what he said. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but he straight up said something along those lines, like, do not own our stock, which I assume he probably echoed with a lot of the executives at the company. Like, if you have any doubt that we're going to do this, you should leave. And then a bunch of people left. It might be something else. I don't know. I'm not sure, but that would be my guess, is that Elon fundamentally thinks long-term Tesla is going to be all about robotaxis and Tesla Bot. It's going to be humanoid robots and using AI to drive around these cars. And there were several people at Tesla that were like, those are cool, but I think Tesla's a car company and maybe an energy company as the margins improve on that. But I think there were a lot of people that were probably skeptical. I don't know. I just got impressions in the past from Drew Baglino that he was a bit more considering of, okay, but we'll still be a profitable business if we just sell cars. He said something along those lines in earlier earnings calls. That's kind of the vibe I got, was that he was all about the transition to electrification is going to require 20 million EVs a year for many years. And Elon seemed more interested in that's going to take too long. The fastest way to get all gas cars off the road is if we have one robotaxi replacing 5 gas cars, because it's going to be so cheap that people won't own cars anymore. And again, I think he's oversimplifying the problem. I think it's kind of hard to argue with that, because he clearly thought it was possible years ago and it still hasn't happened yet. So that, to me, is an indication that he thought it would be a lot easier than it ended up being. And he probably still thinks it's going to be closer or sooner than it really is. Elon thinks people are not going to want personal vehicles anymore. Yep. And I don't agree with that. I think there's a lot of reasons people still want to own and buy personal vehicles, even if robotaxis do exist. And I also think the limitations in regards to mass rollout of robotaxis are going to be far larger than he realizes. Although, to his point, to counter my own opinion, because I'm wrong on lots of things, last time I drove through San Francisco, there were a lot of Waymos. They were everywhere. Now, I'm pretty sure they're geofenced to a certain area, but I must have seen like 25, 30 of them within 30 minutes. There were just a crap ton in like downtown San Francisco, and none of them had drivers in them. I was checking. I was looking at each one to see if there was a driver, and none of them had drivers. And I was like, well, the weather is good, and they're probably on a very predictable route. It's a bunch of squares, city blocks, and it just stays within those perimeters. So it doesn't mean that level 5 is happening, but I'm just saying, yeah, in some jurisdictions, I bet robo-taxis will exist, and there will probably be similar. I think it's what it's going to turn out to be is probably another much more exaggerated version of the Boring Company. You know, when the Boring Company first launched, they were kind of hyping up this like, oh, look at all the tunnels. We're gonna solve traffic. We're gonna dig just like thousands of miles of tunnels to all these different cities, right? Like all this hype around what the Boring Company could do. Now, did that really happen? Did they dig thousands and thousands and thousands of tunnels? Did they solve traffic? No, it wasn't really all that Elon hyped it up to be. But does the company exist? Yeah, there is a Boring Company tunnel. You can ride in it in Las Vegas. They've expanded it to other locations slowly. They're working on expanding it in other countries, or other cities, I should say. So it's around. It's doing stuff. Did it turn into the ginormous cash cow that Elon was kind of hyping it up to be? No, but it's around. That's kind of what I anticipate with robotaxis. Is like there will be a few selected cities where within certain regions they're allowed to operate when the weather is good, and they'll do okay, and they'll have a couple dozen of them driving them around, and they'll get to boast about, oh, see, we've delivered the product. It's real. It exists. It's out here. Here it is. It's working. But will it be the tremendous cash cow where, okay, people don't need to own personal vehicles anymore? Like every city in America has thousands of robo taxis moving people around. Personally, no, I don't think that's what'll happen, but or at least not in my lifetime. But I've been wrong before, so I would love to be proven wrong. I'd be very excited. Honestly, that's something I was talking about with the Tello team. Is that I was like, look, if we double down, if we really want to talk about what's most efficient for the planet, if we're just moving people around, public transportation, of course, is far more efficient than individually owned vehicles. And if robo taxis happen, that's going to be super efficient as well. All electric, small vehicles that move around 1 to 2 people at a time. They'll be super efficient. They'll be operational all day instead of like a personally owned vehicle where it just sits in a parking lot most of its life. I was like, if that world happens where it's just a bunch of robo taxis and public transportation, then the last personally owned vehicles we'll need are pickup trucks. People who are using vehicles for a bit more than just moving people around, but they need them for work or they need them for activities like moving bikes around or moving surfboards around or getting work done and moving construction equipment and stuff. So even if I'm wrong about the whole robotaxi thing, and it turns out that they are really popular, and Tesla achieves level 5 and they're able to crank out as many robotaxis as they can, and we just have these autonomous vehicle fleets all over the country, well then the vehicles that aren't going to aren't going to do the job of robotaxis that are going to be needed are pickups. Are trucks that are used for work or for camping and that kind of thing that a robotaxi is just not going to be well suited for, because robotaxi is going to be smaller and not sit a ton of people and just be focused on efficiency, right? So, yeah, trains are great too. I wish we could get more trains in America, but land ownership rights is a huge problem. If you look up a few documentaries on YouTube, there's free ones that talk about why trains aren't as common here. It's a big problem that there's not an easy solution for. The U.S. government, for better or for worse, was designed to be slow and inefficient. Mainly because, the people who founded the country were fed up with the tyrannical government they were living under. But there are some downsides to having a slow and inefficient government, which means sometimes when there's a good idea, it doesn't get put into effect very quickly. Sunny Patel says, do we know what was happening with the supposed Model 3 performance delivery delays? No, I don't, but I'm pretty sure a few people have taken delivery now. I've been watching videos on them. So people own them, I believe. Yeah, I'm not sure what's causing the delays at this point. Rental 4x4 Jeeps would be good to get to mountain trailheads. Doesn't have to be pickups. The bed is wasted space often. Yeah, it could be both. But I'm just saying that the Tello is about the size of a Jeep anyway, so it depends on what you're using it for. Some people might want the bed. Some people might want the off-roading. Tello's pretty good at both. I haven't seen a great all-electric Jeep yet. I think Tello's kind of a good mix because it could still offer great range. The generic, typical view of a Jeep is just not very aerodynamic by design. So if you don't care about range, maybe then just renting a Jeep would be fine. But some people don't want to have to load all of their equipment and tools or camping gear or whatever it is. Some people like to leave things in their car, and they don't want to have to unload them every time they hail a robotaxi or use public transport. Like car seats. If you got kids, you just want to be able to leave the car seat in the car, so you're not going to want to just rent a Jeep every time because you're still going to have to load the car seats in and take them out when you're done. So I still think there will be a lot of use cases for personally owned vehicles. If all that mattered was moving people from point A to point B, the best-selling vehicle in the U.S. would not be the F-150. F-150 is not the most economical way to move people around, but it is the best seller. And even if we ignore pickup trucks, the best seller after that is something like a Model Y. Model 3 is cheaper, Model 3 is more efficient, but the Model Y sells better. Why? Because it has more storage space. It has more practicality. So people use vehicles for much more than just transportation. There's a styling thing to it. There's a practicality thing to it. So I'm in favor of, just look around. Look at everyday roads that are in your neighborhoods. Are all the cars pretty much the same? No, you got big trucks, you got little trucks, you got small cars, you got big cars, you got crossovers, you got SUVs, you've got vans, you've got coupes, you've got sports cars, you got everything in between. We're very fickle as a species. We all have different tastes and preferences. So I'm all in favor of having lots of different options. I'm not one of those people that thinks we need to have one or two companies in control of the entire automotive market. Oh yeah, it was the EPA rating, which they did solve. The EPA tested the Model 3 performance, and it actually got better range than Tesla thought it would. I think that EPA estimated range was 303 miles. Kind of confused why we're waiting for the UI refresh to deliver some taking delivery. Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. Do I think Tesla should have went more hardcore with the Model 3 performance? 510 horsepower is kind of underwhelming. 700 horsepower would be better. For sure, it's not plaid fast, but it's still a fast car. Yeah, you're not the only person I've heard suggest that. As someone who's not super into performance, like I've driven a performance Model Y, and I thought that was absurdly fast. I was like, this goes way faster than I would ever need to go, and probably way faster than people should be going. I don't think it needed the extra horsepower, but someone who's way more into performance cars than me would probably disagree with that. I think Tesla probably, I was watching Kyle Connor's review of the Model 3 performance. I think that was just this morning. And he was driving it around, and he was saying similar things of like, I want them to do a spicier one that goes up higher, 700 horsepower or whatever. And my guess is Tesla had to make a decision with the performance refresh. My prediction, I could be wrong, but my guess is they either had to make it qualify for the federal tax credit by having it start under $55,000, which meant keeping the price point and the cost of materials under a certain amount. Or if they did that, if they really beefed up the motors and the battery and the powertrain and everything to get it over 700 horsepower, it probably wouldn't qualify for the tax credit. So they had the decision between, do we make a super high performance vehicle, or do we make a pretty high performance vehicle that qualifies for the 55K tax credit, assuming you have the right color options and stuff. And I think they made the right call. Personally, if I was in their same decision of like, okay, we can really spice up the performance, but it's going to cost $60,000 or $65,000, or we could give a little bit better performance and update the look and the seats and stuff, but it'll start at $53,000, $54,000. And then after the tax credit, that'll dip below 50. I think given the EV market right now, leaning more towards affordable is the right call. I think that's wise. Maybe it leaves some people disappointed, but I think you'll always have some aspect of the performance community disappointed because they're going to look through every little thing. So that they focus probably more on volume instead of quality. There's no way the tax credit influenced the car design. Oh, I hard disagree with that. I'd say it absolutely influenced the car design. That's the only reason they're putting the Panasonic batteries in the performance, is because they wanted to qualify for the tax credit. If they didn't care about the tax credit, they would have put in the LG battery pack that's in the long range. But they didn't. Do I think the Roadster 2.0 will really come out in 2025, like Elon said, with all the delays and layoffs? At this point, I'd be surprised. I won't say it's impossible, but I will be surprised if they're still on schedule, because Elon very early in the year was like, yeah, we're going to release the Roadster. It's going to be great. It's coming out. And then several weeks later, he's like, I'm going to fire everybody. And all these people left the company. So I would not be shocked if it's been delayed because Elon wants to go all hands on the Robotaxi. You know, the Roadster really doesn't support the Robotaxi concept that much. It's all about making a vehicle that's fun to drive. And Elon seems very focused on making a vehicle that's never driven. So I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked at all if the Roadster does not come out next year. People have been memeing on it for years, and they can continue to meme on it for years to come. It's annoying. I've actually suggested that they shouldn't make the Roadster. I said they should just scrap it. I don't think it would be a high margin vehicle. I don't think it would put a big dent in electrification. It's just not really what we need. The original intention of the Roadster, when they unveiled it, they said the point of this vehicle is to show that EVs can be better than gas cars in every way. And I don't think that's a point that needs to be made anymore. I think most people are aware that, yeah, you can make a long-range EV, you can make a practical EV, and yes, we know EVs are fast. Now most of the argument is how affordable can you make EVs? And the Roadster's kind of going the exact opposite. So I know it'd be sad. I want them to release the Roadster. Like, I'd be happy if they did, but, you know, it's just been too long, and it's just kind of become a meme now. But, like, it gives fuel to the flame to all the Tesla critics out there that say, oh, Tesla's not going to do anything they say they're going to do because they haven't delivered the Roadster. And there's another trend lately of everybody tweeting out the Marquez ordering the Roadster tweet. And it's this bad juju that everybody gets to hold over Tesla of like, you still haven't delivered that. You still haven't delivered that. I'm like, if you just came forward with a public statement that said, okay, you know, the performance lives on in the Plaid, we're not making the Roadster, then just refund everybody and give them a big discount on a Model S and X if they still had a, you know, it would be sad because the Roadster is a very pretty car, but at least in that $250,000 price segment and making a car that can kind of fly and do 0 to 60 in 1 second with a cold gas thruster out the back. I don't think that's going to persuade anybody that EVs are the future that aren't already against EVs. Like, I don't even see it as good marketing. Like, it would make for a week's worth of fun YouTube videos. It would be all we talk about in the YouTube community for like a week, and then that would be it. It would be over. And then no one would care. It'd be the same exact thing that happened with the Rimac Nevera. I think I mentioned that in my video about canceling the Roadster. I was like, that would be the perfect... that the Rimac Nevera basically did all the work. If the point of the Roadster was to prove to people that EVs could be fast and amazing and do all these crazy things, the Rimac achieved that. It's already been proven. You don't need to also prove it by sticking on a cold gas thruster. Like, I just don't see what it changes about anything, and it probably would take up a lot of engineering resources and time and clog up service centers with people trying to fix their cold gas thrusters. So if Tesla's trying to be the next Toyota in regards to massive automaker that delivers as many cars as possible, yeah, I don't think they need a Roadster. I think they should just scrap it and call it good. But Tesla probably hates that idea because the PR would be bad for a while. They'd be like, oh, they scrapped it, they canceled it, and the stock would tank. So instead they just say, it's coming. It's coming. Yeah. Performance division for Tesla, like how VW has Bugatti and Porsche. It's not a horrible idea. But again, I don't think it's that necessary. What car from Tesla do you think will actually release next, not including a potential... the Robotaxi... Oh, that you're saying not including a potential Waymo like Robotaxi. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they said August 8th they want to unveil the Robotaxi. I guess it wouldn't be that hard for them to unveil a new Roadster. It's another thing if they actually deliver it, but I wouldn't be shocked if within the next year they unveil a newer Roadster that they've made some changes to, but then the production of gets delayed. Aside from that, a van they've talked about doing for a while. They've teased it several times with the little... At Investor Day, they had a blanket over it on the projector screen. So seems like they have a design probably internally for a van. I hope that gets unveiled soon. But yeah, your guess is as good as mine. It's hard to know what's going on there. Um, let's see. I'm just getting really excited and anxious for my Model 3 Performance delivery since I got my VIN on May 16th. Hey, congratulations, Sonny. I hope you like it. That's going to be a fun vehicle. Yeah, I wish I was in the market. I would definitely get the same one. The Boring Company should dig tunnels for high-speed electric trains. Much better use. I don't think it's that translatable. The Boring Company is designed their tunneling system for a pretty small tunnel, which is why they were able to dig the tunnel under Las Vegas for much cheaper. There were two bids, just to remind everybody. The city of Las Vegas wanted to make an underground transportation system for moving people around, and the Boring Company gave a bid for like 50 million, and then a train company, like a subway station company, gave a bid for like 200 million. So very different things. A train has to be bigger. They have to design the rail system differently, and it has to be accessible or a certain thing. Whereas when you're just digging a hole in the ground that cars have to drive through, you don't have to design as much ventilation, and you don't have a rail system, and it's simpler and involves moving less dirt. So I don't think it's I know they're both tunnels, but I think it's like apples and oranges type thing. It's like the Boring Company is good at what's a good example? If the Boring Company was a bicycle, then a train company that develops a subway system would be like a car. It's like different use cases. If you're going on a trail, or you're trying to navigate traffic, a bike is probably better. But if you're trying to go hundreds of miles, the train is probably better. So it depends. The train was a better choice. The tunnel had traffic, so that didn't solve anything. Well, it was more expensive, but there were occasional issues with the tunnel, but for the most part, it's been pretty efficient from what I've heard. Las Vegas is expanding it. They like it so much, they want to keep building on top of it. So I think the Boring Company system makes a lot more sense when you have very inconsistent amounts of traffic. Las Vegas has these big events where suddenly they need to move lots of people, but then the rest of the year they don't need to move a lot of people. So if you're just moving, a few dozen people per hour, just having one or two Teslas is enough to keep that system running. Whereas if you had a big, giant train that had to go around this whole system just to move around a couple dozen people, it wouldn't be very efficient. Can someone explain for me in dumbed down terms what was going on with the Delaware court? I don't even understand it all that much, but I'm so tired of the topic because it seems to be all that people want to talk about in the Tesla community is, what is Elon going to get paid? Everybody vote to pay Elon. And I'm like, look, y'all, you might be right. I'm not even trying to say you're wrong. I'm just saying, is that the kind of conversation that's exciting to you people? Like, are you really excited to talk about one of the richest man on Earth's pay package? Does he deserve that? I don't know. Probably, but do we care? Like, so many people want to talk about that. That's all that's going. Maybe it's because there's not that much EV news going around. I don't know. Feels like we finally reached a little lull, which is kind of refreshing, to be honest. There was a several month-long period where it just felt like EV news over and over and over again. And now it's just like all people want to talk about is, what is Elon going to get paid, or should he get his pay package, and should Tesla file their headquarters for Texas instead of Delaware? And I just don't care. I'm sorry. I really don't. He doesn't care about the money. He cares about the control. Yeah, and I've been saying for years I think he should leave, not because he's a bad engineer by any means. I just think his talent would be better used elsewhere. Like, how much, if you okay, this is the argument I want to have with the Tesla bull. If there's any Tesla bulls out there, I don't think there's any more watching because I scared them away. But if I could talk to one, I would say, do you believe that Elon spending time at a company helps it? If you believe that Elon being at a company or spending time at a company makes the company better, then you have to acknowledge that the more companies he gets involved in, the less he helps each one. Those two statements, you can't disagree with one of those. They go together. Those are mutually exclusive. If you believe that Elon spending time at a company helps it, then you also have to believe the more companies he works on, the less he helps each one. That's just a fact. So when you add Neuralink into the mix, and when you add the Boring Company, when you add SpaceX, and when you add Twitter now, if he has to manage all these different things or get involved in some way, shape, or form with all these different, or XAI, which he's doing fundraising for, then you have to admit that's time away from all the other companies. And I think one man cannot adequately run or maintain all of these different companies. It's just not possible. There's only so much time in the day. And at a certain point, I think he should eventually just decide this company will be okay without me. I'm going to focus more time on these other companies. So my argument is not Elon should go home and do nothing. It's that I think SpaceX needs more attention. I think the Boring Company needs more attention. I think Neuralink needs more attention. Twitter needs more attention. Everything else he's working on could easily be a full-time gig to just go all in on any of those. Tesla's the one company that he's involved in that I feel like, yeah, they'll probably be fine without him. Mutually exclusive, but non-mutually exclusive. I think Tesla cultists say Elon is perfect and is the second coming of Jesus. Yeah, I've heard similar things. Cisco, I have nothing to say on Tesla. I really appreciate your insights on Tello and Aptera, and congrats on the new gig. Thank you, Cisco. I'm wrapping up the live stream here pretty shortly, but thank you all for tuning in. Yeah, I'd be okay if he lost control of Tesla personally. I would keep my shares. But yeah, that's how I feel about it. Take a break from Tesla. If they need him, he can come back. Yeah, exactly. I just think the mission of SpaceX has not been achieved. So he should dwell on that. The mission of Tesla has been achieved. Even without him, I think Tesla would do great things and they'd be fine. Arguably better, but that's when I tend to tick off people. So anyway, yes, a Tesla RV would be wonderful. I hope they make something like that. But anywho, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day, and I appreciate all the questions and topics. It's just so much fun to just jump around with all the different news and companies, and it's an exciting industry. There's a lot going on. There's some things we have to be patient for, sadly, but lots of things to look forward to, and I think it's going to change the way our roads work and change the way transportation is forever. So thank you all for sharing that enthusiasm with me. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Bye, y'all.